There, yeah, sorry about that then. It was frozen, but now it's not anymore. Not sure what happened, but anyway, it's working now. Let's continue. Let's make this part 12 then, since as far as exporting to YouTube will be. Anyway, it was for the good of the country. Anyway, I was just following orders. Orders? What exactly did you do? Speak. I'm not saying another word. Even if your life depends on it? That's right. Even then. So that's when the tip of the sword broke. Oh, Kazuma-sama. If the results of Clint Van Zeek's autopsy were fabricated, then the investigating officer Gregson and the lead coroner Wilson must have known about it. And they can only have been ordered to pervert the course of justice in that way by one man. The man leading the case for the prosecution, Barak Van Zeeks. In other words, the defendant did have cause to organize this exchange of assassins. Exactly, and as was established earlier, it has to have been the Reaper himself who liaised with Jigoku in Japan to arrange the exchange. So it follows that the Reaper's true identity can only be that of the man who stands accused in this courtroom today, Barak Van Zeeks. No. No, it doesn't. Kazuma Asogi. What? What you've just told the court. Are you absolutely certain of your facts? Did Gregson really fabricate evidence for that trial 10 years ago? I heard it with my own ears. It's shameful admission. In that case, I know the name of the Reaper. What? Lord Van Zeeks. I gave no such orders. I know that for certain. Which narrows down the remaining possibilities to one. If Lord Van Zeeks isn't the one behind all this, then yes, there is only one other person who could have done something like that. I've known all along who it was. I believe I know who it is too. You? I just had a feeling this name was going to come up. The true identity of the infamous Reaper of the Bailey is... Maelstrom Heart. The only person who could have arranged the assassin exchange and manipulated the autopsy results is the Lord Chief Justice himself, Lord Maelstrom Heart. What? Lord Strongheart? Yes, it's true that 10 years ago the defendant handled the prosecution of the professor in court, but it was not meant to be him, actually. But he only took over the case after his brother Lord Clint Van Zeeks had been killed. I can only assume that this is the most inappropriate joke in British judicial history. Well, Lord Van Zeeks, 10 years ago, I was very new to my profession, but I had a burning desire to avenge my brother's death, so I pleaded for control of the case. And I guess Lord Strongheart would have agreed to it, because in case something happened, like how this case was handled, if that was put into doubt, the blame would not be cast upon him, it would be cast upon Van Zeeks instead. That was a perfect plan. The investigation to that point, the supplication of the lords to allow my brother's corpse to be examined, all the evidence I was given, the autopsy reports, it all came from you. I've spent my life since then believing I was in your debt for the way you stood aside and let me handle the trial, but I see now. I was very much mistaken. It was a hugely influential force that caused the inspector and the coroner to break the law 10 years ago. And that same force was still felt a decade later on the other side of the world by Seiichiro Jigoku. Lord Strongheart, everything falls into place when we recognize that you are the Reaper of the Bailey. But he's the judge in the case. What's gonna happen now? The court awaits your response, my lord. This may very well go down in British judicial... hold on. This may very well go down in British judicial history, but I assure you it is no joke. Consider this a formal accusal by the defense. What's gonna happen now? Legally, what can they do? It doesn't warrant a response. A formal accusal? Don't be absurd. The defense's claims are utter nonsense, a wild fantasy at best. You're not going to defend yourself? You claim there was some wrongdoing with Lord Clint Van Ziek's autopsy? That's utterly untrue. But I heard it from Gregson's own lips. He admitted to it. And where is your evidence? What? Gregson's dead now. Unless you were thinking of summoning a ghost to the stand. You mean to say... Well, there's no proof, yeah. I guess that's what he means to say. You mean to say... I forget how the system works in your little backwater country, but in the courts of the British Empire, without evidence, there is no case. I have no intention of entertaining some wild fantasy that can't possibly be substantiated by anyone or anything. Arr! Where does that leave us, though? Order! Order in court. Following Inspector Gregson's murder and in the light of Dr. Wilson's death as well, there's really no one left who could testify about the events of 10 years ago, is there? Is that true? It is Mikotoba, though, who led the autopsy. It was signed by John H. Wilson, but it was not conducted by John H. Wilson. It was conducted by Eugene Mikotoba, so we could call him as a witness, perhaps? Don't know if this is where this is going. So that was the real purpose of the assassin exchange. This court has no business raking over the coals of a case that was concluded a decade ago. The accusal brought by the prosecution and the defense is categorically denied. I take it there are no objections? Kazuma, he's more or less waited his whole life for this moment. Is there really nothing else we can do now? Is there no other avenue we can go down in pursuit of the truth about what happened all those years ago? If only there was someone who could testify about Clint Van Ziek's autopsy. There is someone. And he should be in the gallery even, I think. I think he was allowed in. He's gone to extraordinary length to cover his tracks, even so far as dispatching an assassin all the way to Japan to ensure Dr. Wilson's silence. And Dr. Scythe won't say anything against Strongheart. Actually, I'm starting to think that they had Dr. Wilson assassinated to cover their tracks, thinking that it was him who conducted the autopsy, because they didn't know that it was someone else. Otherwise, Mikotoba would be dead already by now. More than likely. Dr. Scythe won't say anything against Strongheart. But there's still one ray of hope. There is someone left. Actually, there is one person. One person who could still testify about that autopsy. Don't be ridiculous, there's no one left. Who, Ryunosuke? Who? Tell me! Kazuma, please, this trial can't end. Not yet! I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for the truth. The person the defense would like to call to the stand to testify about the autopsy of Lord Clint Van Zieks is... Heaven help us, another Japanese. That's racist. An expert in forensics medicine, my lord. Professor Eugene Mikotoba. 16 years ago, he came to London with Seiichiro Jigoku and Genshin Asogi as a visiting student. And what could his testimony possibly tell us? Professor Mikotoba was the primary assistant during the autopsy in question. He was also the person who actually penned the report. Incorrect. The autopsy was carried out by the coroner, Dr. Wilson. The report carries his signature. It was the primary assistant's duty to keep a written record of the coroner's work during the procedure. In actual fact, the coroner merely read over the report at the end and signed it. In other words, Professor Mikotoba witnessed the entire autopsy from start to finish. The defense demands that Professor Mikotoba be summoned as a witness as a matter of urgency. Whatever really happened in that autopsy laboratory 10 years ago is something only he can tell us. The defense's demand is denied. Well, yeah, of course it would be. Jeez, how can I go up against this guy? He has all the rights. But then again, there are members of the whole judiciary of Great Britain in the gallery, so they could intervene and force him to accept. What? But Professor Mikotoba is in London at this very moment. We could summon him to the stand in minutes. No, of course he's not going to agree to it. Strongheart has no intention of summoning anyone who knows. He's too concerned about protecting himself. Prosecutor Hasogi, let me refresh your memory, as you seem to have forgotten the prosecution stance. Only minutes ago you accused the defendant of being the Reaper and of masterminding the assassin exchange. I did, yes. So present your evidence for those claims and make your case complete. At this time, I don't have the requisite evidence, but that's exactly why we need witness testimony. The professor case is closed. There are no clues in the distant past that will bolster your argument today. I'm afraid to say, Prosecutor Asogi, that you would appear to be possessed by the spirit of your late homicidal father. Now, as I stated earlier, this court has already reached a conclusion with respect to the matter at hand. Inspector Gregson was murdered by Japanese Supreme Court Judge Seiichiro Jigoku. As for any hidden circumstances that may exist, they will be investigated in due course by the proper authorities. But we all know what will happen. That will just give the mastermind of the whole venture time to cover his tracks again. By which you mean me? Damn this case. Your punishment for this contemptible behavior will be decided at a later date. As for you, Prosecutor Asogi, you will be remanded following these proceedings. Willingly, I trust, since you gave your word. Arr. This futile game of revenge is over. Young Master Asogi. God, this reminds me of the whole Edgeworth von Karma trial. Yeah, kind of, yeah. But here it was the prosecutor, actually. Here it's the friggin' judge who's the culprit and crooked. It's even worse. Jeez. That will be all. I hereby declare this trial to be over. Court is, hold it. Who could possibly have the authority to go over the head of the judge? Not Herlock Sholmes. He doesn't have the authority. What could he possibly have to say? Mr. Sholmes, this is no place for amateur detection, Mr. Sholmes. May I remind you that these proceedings are closed to the general public? You will leave the courtroom at once. Mr. Sholmes was instrumental in the apprehension of Seiichiro Jigoku before he fled from Europe. The court should hear what he has to say. Lord Male Strongheart, it's imperative that you refrain from bringing this trial to an end at this stage. Is it really? And why would that be? You need only recall your own words from the opening of the trial to answer that question, if I may. We will stop at nothing to uncover the whole truth behind these disturbing findings. Surely it can't be that the shock of being accused of being the Reaper yourself has erased that from your memory, can it? The whole truth, sir, has already been uncovered. It would seem that we have a great many important members of the judiciary present here today. I put it to you, my dear fellows, should the trial end at this juncture? Well, I was expecting them to step up without Sholmes needing... without them needing Sholmes to rile them up. After all, why have you been invited to attend? To nod along to the prevarications of your superiors? Prevarications? Order! Order in court! It seems to me that we stand before a door that leads to a new era of legal practices, a door that is ajar. Let us emerge from the shadows of the Reaper's decade-long ascendancy. For you and you alone, my dear fellows, have the power to push this door open now. The auditors in the gallery have no rights to express an opinion on court proceedings. Silence! They have no rights, really? He's right. The judge has absolute authority here. Yes, if he calls the trial to an end, it must end. But will that really do? It sense dark things occurring behind the scenes. Dark things indeed. Is there a single person here present who can honestly... What was that? Who can honestly say it doesn't sense the same? But what's... The trial should go on. Summon the witness. That's right. We need to clear this up before that young Japanese fellow is remanded. My lord, you assured those present that you would uncover the whole truth here. Vindicate yourself of this outlandish accusation. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's the very foundation of the British law. A toast to my dependable colleagues in the gallery. On with the trial! On with the trial! Testify! Testify! Well, my lord, you hear the voice of British justice, I take it? I think you'll find it will be rather awkward to silence. The court will recess briefly. I have no intention of shrinking from these allegations. Aha! Bailiff, arrange for the subpoena of the witness at once. As soon as the gentleman arrives at the courthouse, we shall reconvene. A recess won't be necessary, my lord. Pardon? Mikotoba is a close friend of mine. He accompanied me today and is waiting in the antechamber as we speak. I do believe he's been enjoying a little trip down memory lane, in fact. What? Professor Mikotoba is here in the courthouse? Mr. Sholmes, you didn't notice what happened, did you? My dear fellow, no one is in a better position to answer that question than you, surely. I wasn't just asking for the fun of it, you know. Well, I must thank you for your assistance in this matter, Mr. Sholmes. However, you are of no further use here. Kindly leave the courtroom at once. Yeah. But of course, in truth, I find myself rather busy now as a result of these developments. Mr. Naruhodo. Yes. I trust you have Iris's little lucky charm with you. Absolutely. It's still in my pocket. She sends her regards and a reminder. If you find yourself at a dead end, the ears are at your disposal. Just one tug, if you please. Oh, of course. In that case, the trial will continue without delay. Bailiff, show the witness to the stand. Maybe Sholmes and Iris will be searching Lord Strongheart's office in the meantime? So it's Lord Strongheart. He's the Reaper of the Bailey. Where exactly is this trial going to take me, I wonder? Just how deep am I about to be plunged into the blackness of the abyss? Well, I'm ready. I'm ready to head into the heart of this maelstrom and confront whatever horrors it tries to drown me under. Alright, the final part. Final part of the trial. Oh, she's here too? The coroner. So, witness, please state your name and occupation for the court. Eugene Mikotoba, lecturer in forensic medicine at the Imperial Yume University in Tokyo, Japan. Why is she staring at him like this? She wants to cut him down? And Professor Mikotoba, the young lady beside you is... Ah, this is Dr. Maria Gori, Scotland Yard's practicing coroner, the daughter of Dr. Scythe, I understand. Yes, Dr. Scythe. I'm afraid I can't tell you why she's here. She just appeared. You summoned the strange Japanese man as a witness to that autopsy, but you don't summon Mama. That makes no sense. She was there too. That's about the size of it. I've had her eyes boring into the side of my cheek constantly, whilst I was in the antechamber too. Poor man. The idea of it's making me shudder. The revelations about Dr. Scythe that came to light some days ago defiled the reputation of the entire judiciary. She was therefore deemed unfit to appear as a witness in today's proceedings. The Ministry of Justice's decision on that is final. Well, we wouldn't want any more perjury to be committed, would we? The Ministry of Justice. Some questionable strings are being pulled, I think. I remember you, Dr. Mikotoba, but I certainly never expected to be meeting you under these circumstances. Yes, it's been a long while, Lord Strongheart. The prosecution understands that you were a visiting student of forensic science in London until 10 years ago. That's right, I studied under Dr. Wilson at St. Sinners. So you were present at the autopsy of my brother, Lord Clint Van Zeeks? I was, yes. I assisted Dr. Wilson with the entire procedure. Mama is far more skilled than any Japanese man. Well, Dr. Wilson asked me to be his primary assistant on that occasion. And this autopsy report was actually penned by you, I believe? Yes, I noted all of the doctor's findings, and when we were done, I read through the document and signed it. Poor Mama, a secondary assistant, she wouldn't have had such a good view of all the innards. Yeah, that would be a shame, not having a good view of the precious innards of the victim. So, Professor, do you remember Inspector Gregson? Yes, of course. If it wasn't for his insistence, Lord Van Zeeks' autopsy would never have happened. But he was absolutely convinced it would reveal decisive evidence against the Genshin, you see. So Lord Strongheart had to entreat the nobility to allow it to take place. Do correct me if I'm wrong, my lord. It was as a result of that autopsy that a mass murderer was apprehended and justice was done. But Gregson admitted it before he was killed. He admitted that the results of the autopsy were fabricated. You were there at the time, so you must testify. You have an obligation to tell the truth about what really went on. Absolutely, that's precisely why I'm here. And that's why I'm here too. Very well then, you will give your formal testimony now, witness, but before you begin, a word of warning. You will state truthfully and accurately what you saw and what you heard at the time. I wouldn't dream of doing otherwise, my lord. The moment your testimony verges on supposition, I will expel you from my courtroom. Remember that. From my own observations, I couldn't say there was any indication of the autopsy results having been fabricated. Death resulted from a wound made by a Western-styled sword transfixing the heart that I found a little strange. There were no other signs of internal injury, nothing questionable at all. It was just that beautiful but dangerous piece of evidence removed from the man's stomach. Presumed to have been swallowed by the victim, as a way of posthumously identifying his assailant. Hold on. Nothing to suggest fabrication? Professor Mikotoba, are you certain of that? Well, nothing that I could positively identify as such, much less swear to it in testimony. That's unfortunate. Heh heh heh. Come on, by the way he's laughing, he has to be the bad guy. Well, that clears things up nicely. That's a bad guy laugh. The only fabrication here, Asogi, has come from you. What? You claim the inspector confessed just before his death, but that is the fabrication. No, he freely acknowledged it. I swear he did. Freely, with the tip of a sword at his throat, the man was clearly at his wit's end. The court will give no credence to this confession that was uttered in obvious desperation. Quite simply, there was nothing questionable about the investigation of Lord Clint Van Zieks' death. And with this testimony, we have without question uncovered the whole truth of the matter. If I may, my lord, there was most certainly something questionable about it, and the whole truth does rather elude us, I feel. I beg your pardon? Well, you're obviously aware of the facts of the case. All 4 of the professor's previous victims died when an enormous beast was set upon them that ripped out their throats. Oh, such horrifying crimes. But curiously, the killer's last victim, Lord Clint Van Zieks, suffered a different fate. Yes, you're right. He was stabbed through the heart with a sword. That's enough. I believe I warned you about this, witness. I promised to curtail your testimony as soon as it entered the realms of supposition or speculation. Very well, my lord. In that case, the defense will pursue a conclusion to this during the cross-examination. What? I have the right to cross-examine every witness after testimony. And I fully intend to exercise that right. Lineske. I'm afraid that even the presiding judge has no authority to contravene the letter of the law. As I'm sure every member of the judiciary present in the gallery would agree. Yeah, that's right. Appeal to the audience. Very well, you may begin, counsel. However, the moment your argument strays from the established facts, I will not hesitate to bring the cross-examination to an end. Proceed with caution. Yes, my lord. I know you said appeal to the audience, but it sounded peel the onions. And that damn accent of mine. Or you could peel the onions, yeah, maybe that'll work. Make everyone cry. From my own observations, I couldn't say there was any indication of the autopsy results having been fabricated. Death resulted from a wound made by a Western-style sword transfixing the heart. That I found a little strange. You make everyone cry. In all of the previous 4 killings attributed to the professor, the victims were killed by an enormous dog, I believe. Their throats were, well, mauled? Correct. And yet Lord Van Zieks was stabbed. Do you mean to say you think Lord Clint Van Zieks may not in fact have been one of the professor's victims? There is no basis on which to doubt the findings of the investigations carried out at the time. But Genshin Asugi confessed to all of his crimes upon his arrest. He admitted to having taken the lives of all 5 members of the aristocracy. Yet the beast that was used to carry out the killings was never identified. No evidence was found to suggest that Genshin had ever kept a dog. A true hound of hell. I think a piece of evidence that's gonna be important very soon are the Asogi papers. I should probably have another look at it. I, Genshin Asugi, hereby request that upon my death, any and all material possessions and wealth belonging to me in London be delivered to my son, Kazuma Asogi, in the Empire of Japan. It is with deep sadness that I accept my fate in this foreign land, in the knowledge that I will never see my homeland or family again, but I regret nothing about my chosen path. Okay, let me press here too. There may be something about his possessions, I think, being transferred to his son. I think there's gonna be something about that soon. You couldn't say. No, sadly not. But then you couldn't say there wasn't any indication either, could you? No, true, I couldn't. I was at Dr. Wilson's side as he performed the procedure, recording what he did, but at times, of course, he instructed me to fetch implements and such like. Whilst I was away from the operating table, obviously I could have missed something. And at those times, what was the secondary assistant doing? Following this Japanese man's orders to adjust the lighting or pass him implements. But that doesn't mean Mama wasn't a vital part of the team. Quite, yes. So would you kindly refrain from staring at my cheek like that? Professor Mikotoba, think, was there nothing at all that seemed out of place to you? Well, yes there was, as a matter of fact. Okay, here I already pressed. There were no other signs of internal injury, nothing questionable at all. But, you weren't actually present at the autopsy yourself, were you, Dr. Gori? Does that matter? Well, I just wonder how useful your testimony can be in that case, really. I mean, it would be different if your mother, Dr. Scythe, were in the stands, but... I've read all the paperwork about the case, and Mama's told me the story countless times. The statement I just made is exactly what's written in the autopsy report. I did confirm that myself at the time, it's true. Besides the stab wound, there were no other signs of internal trauma. Really? I mean, if I look at the autopsy report myself, is there anything else that maybe they're not saying? Single stab wound to the heart, other superficial external wounds indicative of a duel? Yeah. Well, they're talking about internal trauma, so yeah. I see. Mama told me all about it. Oh? She said there was nothing of note internally. But they did find an amazing piece of evidence, something unbelievable. Unbelievable? What do you mean? Come on, Dr. Gori, what was it? It was just that beautiful but dangerous piece of evidence removed from the man's stomach. What was it? What exactly was it, though? What does beautiful but dangerous mean? Well, it was sparkly and round with a hole as if it might slip over a finger, perhaps. Sparkly and round with a hole? What, a ring? It was a ring, belonging to Genshin Asogi. Why would he have swallowed a ring? My father's ring was inside the victim's stomach? At the time, Genshin wore a large ring on the digitus quartus of its left hand, the fourth or ring finger. I understood it was some sort of keepsake. When my father left Japan for London 16 years ago, I was 8 years old, but I remember that ring. You do? My father's possessions were sent to our family home in Japan after his death, but the ring wasn't among them. Obviously not. It was a key piece of evidence. It remains under lock and key in the stores at Scotland Yard to this day. After the autopsy, Genshin was summoned by the police to check for the presence of his ring. It wasn't on his hand, of course. Moreover, there were deep abrasions on his finger where it had been pulled off. They arrested the man there and then, right before my eyes. How could they? I brought the ring along with me today. What? Here it is, a bit dusty from years in the stores. Good gracious, yes, that's it. I haven't seen that in 10 long years. And that was found inside the victim's stomach? Can we have it entered as evidence, or is he gonna oppose it? Yes, I'm afraid so. You hesitated there, Professor Mikotoba. Should we read something into that? Well, it's just that thinking back now. I didn't actually witness the moment it was extracted from the victim's body. Oh my, really? At that precise moment, Dr. Wilson had asked me to fetch him a new scalpel, you see. Dr. Gori, the removal of historic evidence from the stores requires my consent, does it not? However it came to be here, the court cannot deny that this is crucial evidence for today's proceedings. Very well, you may submit it. Or is he not expecting us to find anything wrong with it? It's not the sort of ring normally seen in Japan. They almost look like claws protecting that jewel. Well, it's only the stone that I can examine. These fat claws are doing a good job of protecting the equally fat gemstone in the middle of the ring. Yes, if you were clumsy, you could give yourself a rather nasty cut on them, I should think. Ow! Now my finger's bleeding. The claws really are sharp. Oh my, that was very quick clumsiness, Mr. Naruhodo. Even for you. Who would make such a dangerous ring? You couldn't swallow it without doing yourself some fairly serious damage, surely. Sticky mochi bun of about that size would go down much better, with some red bean paste in the middle. Someone as clumsy as me would probably manage to choke on it somehow. Yeah, if there was no other internal injury, despite the fact that he swallowed the ring, that doesn't make much sense, does it? We must examine it very carefully, Mr. Naruhodo. Very carefully indeed, I just did. Yeah, here. If I present it here, how would it be possible for there to be no other internal injury if he swallowed a ring that sharp? Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm on the right track. The court has heard that the ring was extracted from the victim's stomach, but you didn't actually see it being removed, did you, Professor Mikotoba? That's right. As I said in my testimony before, at that moment I was fetching a replacement scalpel that Dr. Wilson had requested. In other words, you can neither confirm nor deny whether this ring, in fact, really came from the victim's stomach or not. What are you suggesting, counsel? That the ring was never in the victim's stomach to begin with. It's entirely feasible that Dr. Wilson fabricated that detail about the autopsy. What are you saying? That Dr. Wilson was in possession of the ring in advance, after it was somehow stolen from Mr. Asogi. And he produced it during the procedure, pretending to have found it there and then, in the victim's stomach. Supposition at best. What possible evidence do you have to support such a rash claim? This evidence right here. That's the autopsy report. It's explicit in that report, counsel. Other than the ring, nothing unusual was noted internally, so I'm not sure how you intend to prove your point. That's exactly the point. There should have been... how should I say? Injuries inside this digestive system. Like in the esophagus or something like that. When it went down, it should have scratched the inside. You've already done it for me, my lord. The lack of internal injury says it all. What? To swallow a ring of this size would require considerable effort and determination, and in addition to its size, there are the sharp claws around the gemstone to contend with. My brother was a determined man, and on the brink of death, even more so, I'm sure. He would have stopped at nothing to ensure that evil killer was brought to justice. But if he really had swallowed that enormous ring, it's inconceivable that no traces of its passage down his throat would have remained as internal trauma. Yeah, there we go. He worded it a lot better than I could. And there you've arrived at the sticking point. That's precisely why I had my doubts about the findings myself 10 years ago. Then why didn't you say something at the time? I did. I still remember the conversation I had with Dr. Wilson in the laboratory that day. Look at this. Now, this is a very curious thing to find in a man's stomach, wouldn't you say? But isn't that rather peculiar, Dr. Wilson? What's that now, Mikotoba? Well, if you swallowed a ring of that size with those sharp metal claws that it has, surely you'd expect to see damage to the throat and esophagus. Torn mucous membranes at the very least. Dr. Mikotoba, may I remind you that I have vastly more experience than you? I'm terribly sorry. I can think of plenty of ways to explain why no injuries would be seen. No, let's say this. The victim would appear to have ingested the item as evidence to identify his assailant. Go ahead, write it down. So I was right. Dr. Wilson deliberately fabricated the results of the autopsy to implicate my father. On someone's orders, no doubt. I'm disappointed, Counsel. That argument is nothing more than speculation. What? Dr. Wilson was Britain's leading authority on forensic science and autopsy work. There is no scientific basis on which to doubt the man's expert opinion. Pardon the interruption, my lord, but... damage to the mucous membranes of the throat is easily identified, even in living subjects. Using a device called an endoscope, recently demonstrated in practical use in France. I want one. The government can pay. Endoscopies. I've never had to undergo any, but I hope I never have to because it looks pretty gross. That big tube going down your throat. Yeah. Rest assured that your removal of evidence from the stores without permission will not go unpunished. We open up the dead to find the truth. I beg your pardon? But Mama, she chose to stitch your corpses up with all her secrets inside. That's wrong. Dr. Gory, it's looking as though she's chosen to walk a different path to her mama. Yes, the ring. What about the ring? I've just remembered something. An earlier incident. What incident? The one I recounted to you before, about a memory I have. Of Genshin Asogi saving my life. Did he have the ring at that moment? What, my father saved your life? It was 10 years ago on a foggy night. Genshin and I were walking down some back streets at a late hour. All of a sudden... Don't make a peep, you're coming with us. All of our assailants were armed with pistols, their faces obscured by scarves. Bang! The next thing I knew, there was silence all around. Genshin lay on the cobbled street. Blood was seeping from his left hand. He shielded me. It was on the ring finger of his left hand that he used to wear that ring. Are you saying... I've always believed those thugs were after me, but now I'm starting to question if perhaps I wasn't the intended target after all. Wait, but... Genshin was arrested 2 days after that attack, and in that short interval, the decisive evidence needed to indict him was miraculously found. You mean the ring was stolen from him? You think that's what those thugs were after that night? Yeah, they did that so that they could incriminate him later down the line. It was all an elaborate plan. You pathetic coward. You expect me to believe that you weren't involved? What do you mean by that? It was you, wasn't it? You're the one who took it. You stole my father's ring. You set the whole thing up so you could paint him as a mass murderer and have him arrested. Kazuma, open your eyes. Inosuke, you must know deep down, the truth can be completely obscured even when your judgment is only slightly clouded. But at the moment, you seem to be floundering through a dense fog. Is that why you were so insistent I should be present in this trial? To see you like this? Well, this is an amusing spectacle. What a grandiose expression on your face, as if you were Lady Justice herself. Lady Justice is blind, though. She has a... How do you say that? A scarf or something around her eyes? It seems you've thoroughly convinced yourself of this alleged fabrication of the autopsy results. So much so that you're apparently blind to the blatant contradiction that would be born out of it. What? Though it's extremely hard to believe, let us imagine that there was some misconduct during the autopsy. If that were the case, why would Asogi not have disputed the findings in his trial? Oh, in the closed court hearing 10 years ago, the defendant never once denied the claims against him. Isn't that right, Lord Van Zieks? Yes, that is indeed correct. Upon hearing the verdict of guilty, he merely closed his eyes, quietly accepting the judgment. The actions of a man who has accepted responsibility for his deeds and is resigned to his fate. But then... Oh my, that is very strange. If Mr. Asogi did nothing to oppose the charges against him, then... that would surely mean there was no fabricated evidence. An obvious conclusion at which you should have arrived many minutes ago, Prosecutor Asogi. Your twisted loyalty and clouded judgment are hampering your ability for logical thought. Arr. Is there anything, maybe, in the Asogi papers that may shed some light on this? He said that this paper was his last weapon, or something like that. Genshin Asogi's silence at his hearing can mean only one thing. There was no fabrication of evidence during the autopsy of his final victim 10 years ago. But if that autopsy was all above board, there will be nothing to stop Lord Strongheart bringing this trial to an immediate conclusion.
Idiot.
Thank you, Ryunosuke. If it wasn't for your frank words just now, this trial may very well have ended prematurely. Kazuma? What's this latest absurdity, Counsel? My lord, your reasoning is perfectly sound. But for one giant hole, I beg your pardon. You claim my father's silence was due to the fact that there was no fabricated evidence, but there's another possible explanation. You've overlooked the possibility that he had a reason for maintaining that silence. Silence that would lead to him being convicted and sent to his death? If the autopsy results were an invention, there's no conceivable reason why the man wouldn't have protested. To protect his family, maybe? If there was a big criminal circle behind it, with assassins both in Japan and Great Britain, maybe some threats were made on his family's life. Oh, those results were an invention, alright. There's no question of that. Or are you forgetting that 2 people with a connection to that autopsy have been assassinated? If I force the grievances I feel from my mind, I start to see you in a very different light. I think perhaps it's you who's been living in delusion these 10 years. Me? Kazuma-sama has created one last chance for us here, Mr. Naruhodo. If we can only show there was a reason for his father's silence in his trial, a reason why the man would have said nothing even though he was innocent, could it have been part of some negotiation, perhaps? Enough rhetoric, the court must be shown evidence. What proof do you have that could possibly explain Asogi's silence in court? I don't have a ton of evidence to do with what they're saying, aside from that. The Asogi papers? No. I bet this is a generic answer coming up. As I indicated before, my patience for rhetoric is growing thin. Yeah, well. What, the sword? The ring? Okay, well, this is also wrong. The sword? Okay, this is not it either. What could it possibly be? Oh, what, this? Ah. It's true that Genshin Asugi's silence during his trial resulted in his conviction, but that didn't actually lead to his execution. On the contrary, it led to his escape, an escape that was only possible because he'd been sentenced to death. Although I find it hard to believe my father would have negotiated in that way, the defense is correct. A fake execution, falsification of a death certificate, and a jailbreak inside a coffin. Clearly such an elaborate plan couldn't have been carried out by my father alone. He must have had the help of a collaborator from the judiciary. I have here the dismissal notice of the chief warder who was working in the prison at the time. The notes read, there are indications that the jailbreak was in planning prior to the inmate's incarceration. In other words, there were suggestions of some sort of negotiation between Mr. Asugi and the British government. In exchange for his silence in court, he was given an assurance that he would be broken out of prison. Yes, with that sort of clandestine agreement in place, I can imagine he would have kept very quiet. I would go further than that, in fact. I would say that the elaborate jailbreak of Mr. Asugi can be explained in no other way. The help he received must have come from a very high level indeed, for it to be carried out the way it was. Order! Order! First fabricated evidence and now a jailbreak conspiracy? Of course, because it's all intimately linked. The prosecution wishes to summon new witnesses to the stand. Witnesses? People who can testify about the jailbreak that took place 10 years ago. Governor Caden and the poor chief warder of the prison. I won't allow this trial to turn into a farce. To summon the governor of the prison after all these years? Oh, it wouldn't be any trouble, my lord. What? He's already behind the door. No? Maybe? My dear friend may appear a little rattle-pated at times, but I can assure you he is extremely thorough. He wired both Barclay and the local prison earlier, asking Governor Caden and Mr. Vigil to attend the Old Bailey as a matter of extreme urgency. Mr. Sholmes did that? Are you telling me that both men are, unless I'm much mistaken, waiting just outside the courtroom at this very moment? Excellent. My lord, you must permit this trial to proceed as you declared at its outset. You promised that we would stop at nothing to uncover the whole truth behind these disturbing findings. Very well, bring in the witnesses. Make no mistake, I too would like nothing more than to lay this business to rest once and for all. Temperature in my room shot 3 degrees since I started streaming. Not so cold anymore now. Alright. Would the new witnesses state their names and occupations for the court, please? I, Barricade and Governor of Barclay Prison. Everyone calls me Gossip. I sell jaunty little tidbits. Your other persona, if you don't mind. Oh, I do beg your pardon. Of course. My name is Daily Vigil. I used to be the chief warder at Barclay Prison. The reason you've been summoned here to court today is to testify about the jailbreak of the so-called professor 10 years ago. Losh, the professor? We've already been through all this before, a decade ago. And the conclusion was that there wasn't anything untoward happened. I have trouble with his accent. A convict escaped from your prison, Governor. Hardly that what you'd call nothing untoward. Well. The convict's death certificate was somehow falsified after he was allegedly executed, and he escaped the prison inside his own coffin. A plan of that complexity could never have been carried out without the help of somebody of influence inside the prison. Governor Caden, don't imagine that the passage of time will afford you any protection. If it turns out that you were involved in the plot to break Mr. Asogi out of your prison, then of course, the consequences will be very serious. In all likelihood, a capital punishment. Gods! Hold on there, laddie. All I did was... Witness, Governor Caden. Aye, sir. You have a critical role to play in the public safety of our country. A great responsibility to shoulder. The significance of your testimony in court cannot be understated. Therefore, think carefully before you speak. That sounded like a threat. Think carefully before you speak. And Prosecutor Asogi, if you threaten the witness again, you will be held in contempt of court. You just did it, literally. That was a sort of well-disguised threat, but it did sound like one to my ears. My apologies, my lord. There's no disputing the fact that an intricate jailbreak plot was enacted 10 years ago. Clearly, you were both involved in some way. So you will testify before the court now and explain exactly what took place. Very well, let the witnesses give their formal testimony. Tell the court everything you know of the plot to break Asogi out of Barclay 10 years ago. Jailbreak plot. It was the day that Japanese Jock was found guilty. The directive came from the prosecutor's office. I assigned the convict to the chief warder Vigil here and put the plan into action behind the scenes. I was responsible for Asogi right up until the night of his execution, but I knew nothing of any plot. I didn't ken if there were some negotiations between the convict and the prosecutor's office. All I did was carry out my duty for Her Majesty's great British Empire. A directive from the prosecutor's office? Are you saying that was the jailbreak plot? Aye, that's right. Who sent it? Who authorized that plan? I didn't ken that. You're saying you don't know? Listen, there wasn't a thing about the professor case that wasn't unusual in some way. I didn't ask any questions. I just did what I was told to do. More than that, I couldn't tell you. I see. But if the jailbreak plan originated from the prosecutor's office, then one thing is very clear. As suspected, there were clandestine dealings going on between Mr. Asogi and that office. The jailbreak was promised in exchange for Mr. Asogi admitting to crimes he didn't commit. Conjecture, he's gonna say. Yeah. Speculation. Yeah. Of course he would say that. So let me ask the defense. Oh, yes, my lord. I fail to see how these witnesses have any more pertinent information here. Do you intend to assert your right to a cross-examination? Absolutely, I have no intention of squandering a single opportunity, my lord. It seems all you Japanese are fiercely tenacious. Very well, proceed, counsel. Alright. I assigned the convict to the chief warder vigil here and put the plan into action behind the scenes. I was responsible for Asogi right up until the night of its execution, but I knew nothing of any plot. I didn't ken if there were some negotiations between the convict and the prosecutor's office. All I did was carry out my duty for Her Majesty's Great British Empire. I think maybe the point that I have to press more than anything else is that he didn't know. So Asogi-san agreed to confess to the crimes because he was assured he'd be broken out of prison later. I really don't think that Kazuma-sama's father would have engaged in such negotiations, then perhaps something compelled him to agree. What a terrible thing, using the law to legitimize such underhand dealings with a desperate man. Only to double-cross him in the end. It's quite the opposite of justice. I can't help feeling there's something about this apparent negotiation that doesn't quite add up. Something doesn't quite add up, Mr. Naruhodo? No, it doesn't, but I can't quite put my finger on what yet. In that case, we must keep digging until we identify the problem. The Asogi papers? I mean, I always come back to this. Mr. Asogi described it as the only weapon he had left. But you've already acknowledged that orders came from the prosecutor's office to arrange for the man's escape. There must have been some sort of negotiation. It's the only explanation, but he's just an underling. He doesn't necessarily know. Aye, well, be that as it may, I didn't ken nothing about that. The witness stand is no place for telling what you don't know for sure. I ken that much, I do. Then I presume you also know this. Not telling what you do know is a criminal offense. So you were just following orders, is that it? I'm afraid that won't absolve you of guilt here. A man was still killed illegally, even if he was a condemned criminal. You may very well be found complicit in murder, Governor. So that's what it's to be, is it? Even with the threat of conviction, you won't break your silence. He knows something about it, but he's scared. I knew nothing of any plot. Hold on a minute. It did mention seeing the guy writing something. No, okay, that's incorrect. But I felt like trying anyway. I'm gonna press him. Did you not notice anything unusual happening in the lead up to that night? Oh, everything was unusual, exception after exception. After all, it was the professor. The man had terrorized the country as never before with his crimes. In order to hide his identity, he was forced to wear an iron mask over his head. Hideous treatment. The fella was surprisingly docile for someone who'd taken the lives of 5 of the country's nobles. Being the chief warder, I was the only person permitted to approach his cell. I can still hardly believe that I was duped by my own country. I believe you jumped from the window of the governor's office when the jailbreak was blamed on you, didn't you? Losh Vigil, I can't apologize enough. No, Governor, I don't believe you can. It won't change what's happened. What else can you tell us about the situation, Governor Caden? Okay, so I already pressed here and here. So, Mr. Vigil, you didn't know anything about it at all? That's right, my only role in the scheme was as a scapegoat. That's right, isn't it, Governor? Some poor beggar had to take the rap for it. Alright then, who else did know about the plan? I've no the first idea, laddie. My part in the whole business was basically just dealing with the aftermath. But I wouldn't be surprised if there were other folk in the prison service who'd been given similar orders. So you don't know who else was involved? Aye, that's right. All I can tell ya is that the night it actually happened, the person at the reins was Dr. Stevens. Dr. Courtney Stevens, or Dr. Scythe, as she's known now. Why did I have to get caught up in such a terrible business? Well, there's only 2 statements I haven't pressed yet, so might as well do them as well. You say you don't know who actually issued the directive? Aye, that's right. All I can be sure of is that it was official. But if it was from the prosecutor's office, that narrows down who could have issued it straight away. And it wasn't me. I can't even say with certainty that it did originate from the prosecutor's office. What? There's no telling where it started. There's a fair chance it came from higher up the ladder. Basically, I can't give you any indication of who was behind it. You can't be serious! All we can say for sure is that the order must have come from somebody in authority, I suppose. The likes of us on the ground, as it were, didn't bother with idle speculation. We just get the job done. Did you carry out the plan in its entirety? Sometimes there's just nothing that you can present anywhere and you just have to press everything until the game just unlocks the next thing. Aye, I did everything I could at the time. As you know, Genshin Asogi was shot dead in Lowgate Cemetery after the escape. Tell me, was that part of the plan too? My instructions were to do with getting the jock out of the jail and nothing more. I can't tell you anything about what happened after that. Only, personally, I believe his death was the last part of the plan. Well, there seems to be something here. Mr. Vigil, is something wrong? Yes, sir. What can I do for you, sir? He's saluting now. What is it? Some sort of Barclay convention? What Governor Kading was just saying seemed to upset you. Did it bring something to mind, perhaps? For the last 10 years, I've completely blotted out the memories of that time from my mind. I was betrayed by my superiors in the name of my country. Just as my father was betrayed, it seems. But you see, thinking back now, I really can't imagine that the shooting of Mr. Asogi in the cemetery was ever part of the plan. What makes you think that? Well, it just doesn't make sense, does it? To make the man admit to crimes he didn't commit with the promise of a jailbreak, only to kill him in the end? That's treachery of the worst kind. But the point is, if the intention was always to betray him, why would there be any need for all the chicaneries of an escape? Yes, that's quite true. If whoever negotiated with Asogi never intended to keep his or her hand of the bargain, it would have been far simpler just to let the man be executed in prison as dictated by his sentence. It all happened in that vast chamber of secrets that is Barclay, behind the high prison walls. I suppose nobody knows what really went on in the execution room now. Yes, it's an unsettling mystery, certainly. Truth be told, there is a wee matter that's never quite made sense to me. If you believe there was some kind of negotiation behind the jailbreak between Asogi and the body at the top, it doesn't quite add up, does it? Governor Kading, I must insist that you explain these doubts that you have. By amending your formal testimony. Gats! Aye, go on then. It seems to me that the Japanese fella didn't have nothing to bargain with. The Asogi papers. I was wondering when I would have to present that. Confessing under oath to murders he didn't commit on a verbal assurance of later being broken out of prison. Genshin Asogi was taking an incredibly risky gamble. Very true. There was nothing to stop the British breaking their word and executing him behind closed doors anyway. Under normal circumstances, no man would stake his life on a gentleman's agreement like that. Which means that Mr. Asogi must have had a trump card, something that guaranteed he wouldn't be betrayed. Some kind of weapon. Havers, the fella couldn't he possibly have had anything like that? But you know that he did, Governor. The Asogi Papers, the name given to the last will and testament of Genshin Asogi. It turns out that Mr. Asogi was hiding his will in his cell at Barclay. Chief Warder Vigil caught him with it one day. You squealed, did ya, you wee rat? Did I not tell you to keep that a secret? You can't touch me now. Gah! When Mr. Vigil caught sight of that will through the bars of the convict cell, Mr. Asogi pleaded with the warder. Alright then, but what's on that paper? A last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. A weapon? And after the convict had been killed following the elaborate pretense of the jailbreak, that document mysteriously disappeared, didn't it? Well, yes, all the prison warders searched through the belongings in his cell, but that will was just nowhere to be found. I tell you, it's in the sword. It's in the hilt of the sword. As I understand it, an exhaustive search was made for the document which became known as the Asogi Papers. Governor Caden, I believe you ordered your prison staff to find it at all costs, didn't you? Eh? Would I be right in saying that you knew that the so-called Asogi Papers had the potential to make great waves somehow? James, what the blazes are you blethering about? He was forbidden to have anything to write in his cell, so that he could not pass on information to people on the outside, what he knew. And he was killed so that he could not do it, but there remained the papers which they never found. The will was found, right and proper, in the fella's cell where I said it would be. But how can that be? Where in his cell? We all searched the place, from top to bottom. Well, you didn't do a proper job, eh, you peely-wally galoot. You can't criticize me now. I showed it to you before, did I know, young lawyer? Yes, you did. I have the document here. It's written in Japanese and reads, The Last Will and Testament of Genshin Asogi. Which means everything is as it should be. Not quite, my lord. You see, there's an undeniable inconsistency here. What? What inconsistency? Mr. Asogi described this document as the only weapon he had left. And yet this will contains nothing of significance at all. Nothing that would have given the convict any leverage. Are you suggesting, my learned friend, that the last will and testament stored at Barclay prison all these years is actually a fake? As has clearly been demonstrated already, what went on at Barclay prison was far from above board. The last vilification by the defense was an affront to the entire British legal system. Or is it vilification? I'm not sure you say that. This absurd notion of a weapon is something for which we have only the former Chief Warder's word. The man could quite easily be lying, or at the very least, sorely mistaken. What? No, I definitely heard him say that, I swear. Clearly we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to know exactly what happens with these so-called Asogi Papers. A waste of time. If the will was fake, where is the real document? Mr. Vigil was stabbed in the back by the judiciary 10 years ago. He lost everything, very nearly his own life. And now you're going to do it again. You're ready to brand him a liar and turn your back on him without even letting him defend himself. It's clear that Barclay Prison is hiding something. It's clear that the jailbreak was masterminded by somebody in the prosecutor's office. It's clear that some illicit negotiations took place. Is your lordship just going to gloss over these obvious facts or something like that? And obvious and reprehensible facts, okay. The text scrolls automatically during these sequences. What did you say? We should hear more from the Chief Warder. Have him testify again. The trial must go on. The man's voice must be heard. It would seem that the vocal few here are utterly blind to the truth. Very well then, let the witness testify again. Let the court precisely... Tell the court precisely what you think you saw of the victims... of the convict's last will and testament. Yes, sir, my lord. As the warder responsible for condemned convicts, I attended to Mr. Asogi and kept watch over his cell. The night after he was found guilty in court, he was doing something with that will in his cell. We turned the cell inside out looking for it after the execution, but to no avail. I only found out about the Asogi papers when a directive came telling me to impound them. The document was in the folds of the fella's robe that was left in his cell. A kimono, I think it's called. If the last will and testament was not forged, it was just a diversion, I think, so that once they found it, they would stop looking for the real document that was the real weapon. That's what I think, anyway. That's what I've been thinking for a while. In his kimono? That's a lie. We searched every inch of the man's cell. We looked through all his clothes. Can't be true. Were you no satisfied with calling me a liar the once, eh, you wee weffinger? There's nothing you can do about it now. You don't have any hold over me anymore. Other than the hold you like to take on my cravat, of course. Is that what you're going to do? Is it? He's shaking himself without the guy touching him. I love this. Are you going to give me a good shake again? Or are you too scared? Yeah, there we go. Okay, go! Little and large. What a double act. We complied with Asogi's will as far as was possible. All of his personal effects were delivered to his family home in Japan, as a courtesy to the homeland of the most notorious killer our country has ever seen. And we were much obliged. I can confirm that all of my father's belongings arrived safely. Aye, and you cannot deny the handwriting is that of your old man, eh? Yes, there's no mistaking that it's my father's brushwork. Really? And this last will and testament was the man's last weapon, was it? No, it was. I would argue that it was not. I think we can safely assume that the convict was merely prattling, knowing that his end was nigh. So, counsel for the defense, your cross-examination, please. Yes, my lord. Okay, let me save it here again. As the warder responsible for condemned convicts, I attended to Mr. Asogi and kept watch over his cell. The night after he was found guilty in court, he was doing something with that will in his cell. Yeah, tell me more about that. And he pleaded with you not to report him, didn't he? Yes, that's right. And like the Bamput Yar, you didn't tell me, a blatant breach of trust that was. I could see that the man had a noble spirit. I found myself wanting to treat him accordingly. But according to what you told us 2 days ago, the convict had been strictly forbidden from having any writing materials whatsoever. Yes, you're quite right. So when exactly was the will penned? That was before the man was remanded in Barclay, obviously. Yes, at the prosecutor's office under supervision of the relevant authorities. I personally instructed Asogi to make a will for the benefit of his family in his homeland. In that case, why was it found in his cell? What do you mean by that? Well, if it was penned at the prosecutor's office, you would have expected that it would remain there for safekeeping, surely. It's curious, there doesn't seem to be any obvious explanation for why it was subsequently found in the convict cell. Or, well... The defense makes an astute point, well, Governor? A prison governor cannot be expected to ken the inner workings of the prosecutor's office. In that case, Lord Strongheart, perhaps you can shed some light on the matter? I am unable to offer an explanation here and now. He's not the one testifying, what do you want to do? You can't force him. I would have to consult with the notary responsible for the will at the time. The fact that my father's will was discovered in his cell is clearly inconsistent with what was expected. I want to know why. Another inexplicable mystery then. Well, the thing is about that will... Yeah, okay, let me go back to the first one maybe. I'll do them in order. So would that mean that you conversed with Mr. Asogi? Yes, certainly. Though there was precious little time before his execution was due. He was remarkably calm, considering his days were very much numbered. In all honesty, he really didn't strike one as a man capable of mass murder. Yet he confessed in full to the crimes. I know. That's why I felt compelled to ask him one day. I can still recall his reply. I'm guilty of the unforgivable crime of ending another human's life, yes. But he was so tranquil and intelligent, it put me in mind of an Eastern holy man. And what about the will you saw him with? What can you tell us about that? It was the beginning of all the drama. I remember it very well, yes. Okay, so I've already pressed on the first three. I only found out about the Asogi papers when a directive came telling me to impound them. And that directive came from the same source as the one instructing you about the jailbreak? Aye, from the top levels of the prosecutor's office. What name was on it? I didn't ken afore and I didn't ken now. All I can tell you is that my orders were to do everything in my power to find that document. The directive said it had to be somewhere inside the fella's cell. Document? Was that the wording? Document, not will? Aye, that's what it said. Am I clutching at straws here? I just wonder if it was really Genshin Asogi's last will and testament that the sender of that directive was after. Continue with your testimony then, witness. The document was in the folds of the fella's robe that was left in his cell. A kimono, I think it's called. In Mr. Asogi's kimono? Aye, the one he brought with him when he was locked up. Yes, he was permitted to have his personal effects with him during his incarceration, I understand. That's right, he was granted as much freedom as possible during the days before his execution. Indeed, he had a number of items of personal significance, I remember. He was very reluctant to part with them. Some books, that kimono, his sword. I tell you, I bet it's in the sword. Karuma, the famous sword of the Asogi clan. It bears the soul of my family. I don't doubt it, but I wasn't really getting at that. The fact that it referred to the document as a weapon, concealing it inside a weapon, you know? I bet the handle of the sword is hollow, or something. Something to that effect. Forget it being the soul of the clan. Could the man have had a more obvious weapon? Have some respect to the Inosuke. Respectful silence? The warders carry firearms at all times, and the inmates have shackles around their ankles. It couldn't have hurt anybody with that thing. Unless he hit something in it. That hurts a lot. The truth hurts sometimes, more than a weapon or a blade. Still, he was allowed a sword, but no writing materials. Aye, he wrote that will before he came to stay with us at Barclay, you see. Dr. Mikotoba was asked to bring the necessary Japanese writing implements to the prosecutor's office. A Suzuri ink stone, black simi ink, and some Hanshi rice paper, no doubt. I was present when he wrote it, but I'm sorry to say, the letters just looked like a squirming mass of jet black earthworms to me. Are you feeling faint, Mr. Vigil? Is it possible that he saw him writing with something else? A different writing implement? Like a fountain pen, maybe, or something? Mr. Vigil, sir! It was Scarlet, sir! What? Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I didn't mean to blurt it out like that. The ink on the paper you saw was red? Less swaying and more explaining would be helpful. Is it something about the testimony we just heard? Have you recalled something of importance? Something of importance. Possibly or possibly not. I'm unable to tell which way he's leaning, I'm afraid. My lord, the defense asks that Mr. Vigil be permitted to supplement his testimony with this possibly or possibly not important detail. Permission granted. Go ahead, Mr. Vigil. Yes, it was Scarlet. As I remember it, the document was written in scarlet ink, but perhaps I'm mistaken. Blood? Did he use his own blood? Press on that, I don't know. Scarlet, you say? Well, yes, I mean, I only caught sight of it for a brief moment, of course, but even by the dim light in the cell, I remember thinking that it was an unusual color. At the very least, I'm quite sure it wasn't black. Witness, is that really what you saw? Sir? Is something wrong, Lord Strongheart? The will and testament seem to be written in black ink. I apologize. Continue. What do you make of that, Mr. Naruhodo? For Lord Strongheart to be so visibly shaken in that way? Or didn't he ever? You can plainly see the writing here, and it's as black as the Earl of L's waistcoat. Well, yes, you're right. Mr. Vigil, I'd like to confirm one point with you. Did you actually see the content of the document that Mr. Asogi was holding that night? Oh, well, no, I mean, there was no time. Do we have anything else that is written in red? No, not really. There was no time. As soon as he noticed me there, he hid it behind his back. But it was definitely a will, was it? Yes, it was. That's what Mr. Asogi told me. Yeah, well, he would have told you, I guess. The court need waste no further time on this matter. We have the will in question in our possession. There is nothing more to add. A will written in scarlet ink. What did Mr. Vigil really see Kazuma's father holding, I wonder? If you have an inkling, Mr. Naruhodo, you must present it to the court at once. That testimony doesn't give much away. So this will really was penned by Kazuma-sama's father? Anyway, it's starting to sound very much like Mr. Asogi actually had nothing, but the plan to break him out of jail went ahead, which means he must have had some bargaining power. He must have been hiding something. It's the only explanation that makes sense. It's starting to sound like Mr. Asogi might have had something. Which is it, Mr. Naruhodo? I'm not sure, but I feel as though I'm on the brink of understanding all this. Let's listen to all the information again and see what more we can learn. We can't overlook even the smallest detail. I've already pressed on everything, so I have to present something somewhere, and usually when a testimony is amended like that, that means you have to present something here. No, that has nothing to do with what happened 10 years ago. This is something to do with events in the present time. Well, this is red, but this is not ink, it's a stone. Recent scarlet ink stains visible on the little and ring fingers of the right hand, but no document in corresponding ink was found. There, I have it. I forgot about this. Scarlet-colored writing is what you said you thought you saw, Mr. Vigil. And I believe that's exactly what you did see. What? Havers again, you've no evidence to say that. Have a look at this report. That's my brother's autopsy report. Yes, and there's something in here that's bothered me since I first read it. It states that scarlet-colored ink stains were noted on the fingers of the victim's right hand. Yes, so it does. Scarlet ink? Now, I'm not familiar with the habits of the British aristocracy, I freely admit, but I would hazard a guess that they don't all go around with ink stains on their fingertips, do they? Your wit is not appreciated. My brother was a well-bred and fastidious man. Should ink have sullied his fingertips, he would have cleaned them immediately. What is your point, counsel? My point is this: whatever Lord Clint Van Zieks was writing in that unusually colored ink, it must have been directly before his death, because he died before he had the opportunity to clean his hand. What? I remember something troubled me at the time. At the scene, the lid of my brother's inkwell was open. But Clint was punctilious, about such things. It seemed unusual, and no document penned in the color of the ink that was in the inkwell was ever found. So the document had disappeared. Are you suggesting that the document my father had in his hand that night in his cell was the same document that Lord Clint Van Zieks was writing moments before his death? Then it was. If Mr. Vigil's testimony is to be believed, it can only mean that, yes, Mr. Vigil... Sir, when you spotted Mr. Asogi with the document in his cell, his precise words were as follows, were they not? Alright then, but what's on that paper? A last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. A last will and testament? Ah. If the conversation really did go as Mr. Vigil says, then what we now know completely changes the meaning of what Mr. Asogi said. You really think? Mr. Vigil did indeed see the convict with a will, but it wasn't that of Genshin Asogi. It was the last will and testament of Lord Clint Van Zieks. No. What? This is madness. My brother's last will and testament? That would mean that he had chosen to die? That is what it would mean, yes. No, impossible. That is utterly out of the question. Lord Van Zieks. Clint was pursuing the professor. It consumed him day and night. Whatever happened, he would never have abandoned his investigation before its conclusion. Never. He wouldn't rest until the job was done, until the killer was caught. The idea that he would willingly accept his own death is it's obscene. And yet we can be sure that he was writing his will moments before his death, and that Genshin Asogi came to be in possession of that document. So what could the will possibly have contained? Clearly something that couldn't be made public under any circumstances whatsoever, because armed with that document my father was able to negotiate with the judiciary for his life. It was something so damning that it prompted the powers that be to enact that daring jailbreak plot. Yes, there can be no question that the will contained information of the utmost secrecy. Okay, excuse me 1 minute. I have to pee. I need a break. Hold on a minute. Okay, I'm back. I'm here. Information of the utmost secrecy. Ah, no, it couldn't be. The real identity of the Reaper. I've heard more than enough. Pursuing this notion of a phantom will nobody can attest to having seen serves absolutely no purpose. No, my lord, that's unacceptable. What did you say, Council? The last will and testament that Genshin Asogi had in his possession was that of Lord Clint Van Zieks. All the testimony and evidence presented to the courts has logically led us to that as a possibility. Okay, hold on. Right. We have a duty to pursue the line of reasoning to its conclusion. But with no possible means of knowing the contents of the documents, there is no line of reasoning to pursue. A reason why Lord Clint Van Zieks, a man of high noble standing, would have chosen death. Information so secret, people in the judiciary would be willing to negotiate the jailbreak of a condemned killer. The only explanation that fits those facts is an unthinkable truth that turns absolutely everything on its head. But it's just too hideous. Mr. Naruhodo. However difficult the situation might become, you work with your client in pursuit of the truth. That's what you resolved to do when you entered the courtroom this morning, if I'm not mistaken, Miss Susato. So hold your head high, and keep soldiering on. Yes, you're right. 10 years ago, in his final moments, Lord Clint Van Zieks left behind a will. A will that Genshin Asogi was able to use as a weapon to negotiate his escape from prison. In all probability, the details in the will were related to the Professor case. The defense's last statement is mere conjecture. What are you getting at, man? Ryunosuke! As soon as these words come out of my mouth, there is no going back. I believe that the last will and testament of Lord Clint Van Zieks was in fact an accusation. Obviously, it must have been an accusation. An accusation? Yes, revealing the true identity of the Professor. Which would explain why Asogi took it, since it was he who was implicated by the document. No, in that case, the will wouldn't have given Mr. Asogi any bargaining power at all. Then you're suggesting the accusation was against some other person? No, if that were the case, the two men would surely have collaborated to pursue the culprit together. Then your whole argument falls down. Ah, okay, sorry. What, he was admitting to it himself, maybe? A report? A confession? Well, the music stopped, so... You can do this, Mr. Naruhodo. I believe that what Lord Clint Van Zieks actually penned that day was a confession. A confession? Regarding the mass murderer known as the Professor. And his true identity. Enough, Council. What are you saying? Do you even realize? A confession about the true identity of the Professor? That would mean... Lord Van Zieks, I appreciate this must be hard to take in. But it's the only explanation that fits. The killer that terrorized London a decade ago and became known as the Professor, the man believed to have murdered 5 members of the aristocracy, wasn't Genshin Asogi at all. No, you can't be suggesting. It was in fact the man believed to have been the 5th victim. Lord Clint Van Zieks himself. Grrr. finally open, is it? Pandora's box. The great Van Zieks family, they've been thoroughbreds of the British judiciary for years. And Lord Clint Van Zieks, he was a paragon of justice in the capital. But he was actually a mass murderer, a perpetrator of atrocities of the vilest nature. If the general public ever found out, law and order in this country would be finished. My brother. Oh, this is too awful. Poor Lord Van Zieks. I wonder though, did he never suspect, Mr. Naruhodo? Lord Barak Van Zieks is a brilliant prosecutor. Is it conceivable that he didn't realize what his older brother really was? Order! Order in the court! Lord Van Zieks. The professor made use of an enormous hound as his murder weapon. Tell me, did your brother own a dog? Yes, he did. Balmung. It's the name. It's really the name of a weapon indeed. He was a well-known hunting dog. People called him a giant. I don't believe this. When my brother would go hunting in the forest of the grounds behind the house, he always took Balmung. Balmung? After Clint's death, the creature passed away too, almost as if he were following his master. He was a magnificent hunting dog, worthy of the jewel-studded collar around his neck. A jewel-studded collar? That's right. Though sadly, some years ago now, it was stolen by a thief who broke into the house one night. Selden? A jewel stolen by a thief. It so happens that myself and my colleagues have come across such a collar during our time in London. How could you? There was an old emblem attached to the collar too, made of pure gold, with the letter B on it. It was not for the Baskervilles. It was for Balmung? What? An emblem bearing the initial B? Oh my, you know it? It's the insignia of the Baskerville family. What? The Baskerville? Why is that name coming up now? Baskerville is the family name of my late brother's widow. That pure gold emblem was an heirloom which Clint acquired upon their marriage. There can be no doubt then. The collar you've described was Balmung's. The family insignia of Lord Clint Van Zieks' widow? There was a considerable amount of blood on the collar when we saw it. Since we know the dog was used for hunting, it could have been from his quarry, of course. But it could equally have been from human prey. So it is true then. Clint Van Zieks really was the professor? Impossible! These Japanese are making it all up to exonerate their own. So in fact, the person responsible for these murders of nobles and royals was a noble himself. And that threatened to be an enormous scandal that would irrevocably destabilize British society. My father knew that and was using it to negotiate his way out of the unjust charges brought against him. But at the very last hour, those he'd bargained with betrayed him, slaying him mercilessly on foreign soil. Well, can you deny it, Lord Strongheart? 10 years have passed, and still now the 6 million inhabitants of our great capital rest easy believing that justice was done. That though is I can't read that sentence. That though is anonymity remains, the diabolical murderer was caught and executed. Oof. What a mouthful. Very well then. You may have the truth. Tell me then. Tell me what Clint really was. Lord Clint Van Zieks was too pure of heart. When he became a prosecutor and went in pursuit of the black roots of crime, he drove himself into a corner. He came to the uncomfortable realization that to fight the most fiendish of criminals requires one to become even more fiendish oneself. Clint. The 19th century was a truly miraculous 100 years for Great Britain and indeed the whole world. New industry, new technology, and with the birth of the Metropolitan Police Service, new law and order. But these dazzling new developments meant ever deeper shadows were cast on society. Water sullied by factories, air thick with noxious fumes and crime, growing daily to fill the darkness. Lord Clint Van Zieks made it his mission to combat that darkness, but as time went on, it slowly ate at his soul, until eventually he was consumed. It's ironic, really, and somewhat surprising that the truth has once again been unearthed by a Japanese. Once again? What do you mean? 10 years ago, your father, Genshin Asogi, turned up at my office one night. The professor? Yes, beyond all shadow of doubt, you must issue a warrant to search his home at once. Don't be absurd. The man comes from one of our country's most illustrious families. He's a paragon of justice here in the capital. Anyway. Yes, that's the point. That's why none of you British can see it. He's using his noble status as a diversion, whilst he commits these atrocious crimes behind the scenes. Do you have evidence? Nothing definitive as yet. But he keeps an enormous savage hound on the estate. We need the full support of the judiciary for this. We're up against a member of the aristocracy. So a large family estate has a fierce guard dog. You should know that's commonplace here in Britain. I'm sorry, but I can't possibly put Scotland Yard onto this based on the tenuous accusation of a visiting student. So I turned down Asogi's plea, and as a result, he took it upon himself to visit the Van Zieks mansion on his own. We can only imagine now what happened between the two men. Though we know the outcome, of course. Lord Clint Van Zieks perished. I don't believe this. So in actual fact, Kazuma-sama's father did... He made the late Lord Van Zieks meet the same fate. He put a permanent end to the professor killings. By taking the drastic measure of ending the perpetrator's life. As soon as I hurried to the mansion. When I arrived, it was easy to grasp what had happened. And what about the will? Asogi must have already taken it. Nothing of that nature was found at the scene. We had no idea of the existence of such a document at that time. I wonder, though... Because he jumped out of his seat when the mention of Scarlet Ink, when that was mentioned by Vigil earlier. So he knew of the existence of the thing before it was actually explained what it was. I was the only person who knew of the true identity of the professor, so I resolved to keep it a secret and to guard the secret to the bitter end. So you're admitting to it? That you were behind it all? It was you, then, who pinned the crimes on my father. I did what needed to be done in order to protect the law and order of the British Empire. Even if that meant employing an unforgivable ruse. Then it was you who arranged this fabricated evidence. I ordered that detective to take care of it, whilst keeping the truth from him, naturally. Gregson? Obviously, he opposed me at first. Are you off your rocker? We can't do something like that. There's no question that it was Asogi who murdered Lord Van Zieks. The house staff had made statements that they saw the man running from the mansion that night. Yes, well, I've no doubt it was that Japanese fella. But we haven't got a shred of conclusive evidence against the man. And worse than that, he doesn't keep a dog, so we're short of a murder weapon to boot. And we're short on time, Gregson. We must put a stop to this man's rampage, for the good of the country. So we'll use whatever means necessary. Do I make myself clear, detective? Blimey. So that night, 10 years ago, when I was attacked by those thugs in the back streets, and Genshin's right ring was taken, that was him, was it? That was Gregson? And some hired help? Then the detective handed the stolen ring to Dr. Wilson, who feigned its discovery from the victim's stomach during that autopsy. and in the light of that decisive evidence, Mr. Asogi was found guilty of the charges brought against him. However, behind the scenes, he had actually already struck a deal with his accusers, in which he agreed to silently accept the charges. But I just don't believe that part. As far as I knew the man, my father despised such underhanded dealings. It was extremely easy to make him comply. You see, he had one crippling weakness. What weakness? Isn't it obvious? You, Kazuma Asogi. If they had assassins in Japan, like I said before, yeah, they would have threatened his family back home in Japan. Perhaps you have no desire to return to your homeland, Asogi. What? Though I hear you have a 14-year-old son. Agree to cooperate and accept your guilt without contention, and you will see Japan and your son again. Oh, that's how they did it. They threatened to never let him see... That's not possible. He said he knew he wouldn't see Japan again. He knew he would never see his homeland or family again. Whether you choose wisely or not, it will be a closed trial by order of Her Majesty, so whatever rash claims you might make in court will have no trouble in stifling them. There's only one outcome for you, Asogi. The gallows. Don't forget that I still have a weapon at my disposal, a document revealing a truth that I know you're desperate to keep hidden. Yes, it hadn't escaped my mind, which is the only reason I'm willing to bargain with you. I only want to protect this country's law and order. You understand? So, what's it to be, Asogi? Kazuma. He did it for me? And as I told him at the time, my motive was simply to protect Britain from the damage truth would do. To protect this country's law and order, at any cost. I've never dared let myself even consider this possibility until now, but in the light of all this treachery, I have to ask. The mastermind behind the Reaper of the Bailey. Was it you, Lord Maelstrongheart? He's still not gonna admit to that. A rather brilliant idea, wouldn't you say, Lord Barrack Van Zieks? That the spirit of your late brother, that paragon of justice, should return to reap justice for his sibling. Could there be a more appetizing tale for London's masses, I ask you? What brazen... I knew that you'd play the part to perfection, but your role really wasn't that of some embodiment of death. No, you were London's guardian angel. An angel with bloody hands? I think not. Those who had cooperated with me already were only too happy to participate in my plan. Inspector Gregson, Dr. Wilson. My minions worked tirelessly to ensure that the finger of guilt could never come to rest on you. It's all thanks to them that you were exalted as the demigod the Reaper became. But Dr. Wilson left Britain 4 years ago when he was invited to work in Japan. That's right, so I had to employ the services of his young protege after that, Dr. Courtney Scythe. Dr. Scythe? So what with the execution of the Professor and the subsequent reign of the Reaper of the Bailey, I've successfully safeguarded law and order in our mighty capital for the past decade. That is everything. Does that amount to a confession? The way he phrases it... My lords, ladies, and gentlemen, I do hereby confess, it was I who sired the... Sired? I'm not sure how you pronounce that. The concept of the Reaper. However, let me say in my defense, it was all for the preservation of law and order across the entire empire. Lord Strongheart did it? An unforgivable collection of crimes, but still... All those who died at the Reaper's hand were rotten to the core anyway. If it was all in aid of keeping London safe... Is it over then? There is no one left now who can reveal the precise truth of what happened 10 years ago. Therefore, this trial can go no further. Now I would like to entreat all those present beyond these four walls. Nobody need know the truth. Even Her Majesty must be protected from this. I trust you all appreciate the importance of my request. It is, of course, for the good of the country. Can he do this? Can the trial really end now? I have one last question. For the accused, Lord Van Zieks. What? Of course I know that you're a highly accomplished prosecutor, so I find it hard to believe that you didn't have any doubts at all. That you never suspected your older brother. Yes, the same thought occurred to me. It was only once, but yes, I couldn't say that I never had my doubts. My brother's sense of justice was extremely strong, perhaps too strong, I observed. At that time, there were members of the aristocracy who were bleeding the country dry for their own gain, and since they were nobles, they were untouchable. For my brother, it was a source of great turmoil. Coincidentally, at the same time, the professor began his terrifying reign. During the time of the professor killings, my brother did not appear to be himself. And that made you suspect? Yes. But it was only once, not more. Only once, really? Clint wasn't the culprit. That was my conclusion at the time, and I still believe that now. Do you have any evidence to support that idea? The third victim was the Lord Chief Justice at the time. It was he who had recognized my brother's potential and trained him as a prosecutor. No matter what the circumstance is, it's unthinkable that my brother could have killed his friend and mentor. That will do. Neither Clint Van Zieks nor Genshin Asugi still walk this earth. However much we debate this matter now, we cannot hope to reach a conclusion. But there are only two extant pieces of evidence from the time. The woebegone ring that acted as the incriminating evidence to condemn the Genshin Asugi, and the 3-paged last will and testament penned in black ink and left behind by the man. The wretched truth of what happened is exactly as I have explained. You're leaving a part out, I suspect. Later today I will present myself at the Ministry of Justice for whatever sanction is deemed appropriate. That is all. Court is adjourned. No! Matta! Hiriari! Thank you, Kazuma. Me? If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have made this 11th hour discovery. What discovery? My lord, I'm afraid I must insist the trial continues. I beg your pardon? As the court has been reminded today already, we must stop at nothing to uncover the whole truth. And to that end, one particular statement made by somebody in this courtroom moments ago revealed a very subtle contradiction. What contradiction? But all I did was ask the accused one simple question. Well, it began with Lord Van Zieks and his recollection about his brother, but Lord Strongheart didn't permit the defendant to speak at length. I merely pointed out that we can draw no further useful conclusions here, so where on earth is the contradiction? One of them definitely just said something contradictory. It's time to identify who. He said there remained only 2 items, Lord Strongheart, and I think the third one is here with us in the courtroom, so it was Lord Strongheart, I'm sure of it. Something he said was slightly off. Come on, Ryunosuke, think back over his words. Find the problem. Yes, neither of them still walk this earth. We cannot hope to reach a conclusion. There remain only 2 things. Yeah. That's it, yeah, that... No need to read it again, we know what he said. The red ink testament is what we need. Lord Strongheart, would you care to explain? Explain what, Counsel? Among the statements you made just a few moments ago, something you said was inconsistent with a certain piece of evidence we have. Inconsistent? And whilst an inconsistency remains, the defense has a right to pursue an explanation. Ryunosuke, what? Let me warn you about the statements you are making, counsel. They may very well prove fatal. You claim my words contained a contradiction. With which piece of evidence, I ask you? This is gonna be difficult here, so... if things are how I think they are, because of all of these pieces of evidence that I have here, the only one that found its way to Kazuma as a... how should I say, material... yeah, heritage, or something like that, is the Great Sword. Dear me, oh, this evidence makes it very clear indeed, but there is no contradiction with either the defendant or myself, naturally. No, the contradiction here lies squarely with you, counsel. Okay, hold on, because I'm sure of it, but how do I prove it, though? Should I examine it more? Damn it, they won't let me look at it in any more detail. It's the little red tick says that I have already examined everything. Or this? This here is the will left behind by Mr. Asogi. The two-paged will. What? Yet moments ago, your precise words were... the three-paged last will and testament. Could it be that originally there was a third page? For a moment I thought perhaps you'd identified something worthwhile, but it's a mere trifle I see. A trifle. Governor Kaden, oh, what can I do for you, sir? You were present when the Japanese man penned his last will and testament. Aye, I was there for sure. I remember the black worm-like scrawls to this day. And I'm quite certain, my lord, that there was a third page at the time. What? Only the first two pages were the actual will, though. If I mind correctly, the third was a message to his lad back in Japan. For legal purposes, we required only his will. And we wouldn't have wanted any uncomfortable words about Britain to get back to Japan, eh? So it was decided that the third page ought not be sent. How dare you make that decision? I had a right to know what it said, to hear my father's final words to me. The courtroom is no place for sentimentality, counsel. As it happens, I have the third page of the document with me here now. My father's message? It will be given to you at the end of these proceedings. It'll be too late once the trial is over. We need to know what it says now. Even the slightest thing may give us a vital clue. My lord, the defense calls for Genshin Asugi's last words to his son to be read out loud before the court now. Your request is denied. The inevitably maudlin words can be of no consequence now. Maudlin? Is that an old English word that we don't use anymore? The prosecution agrees. The court should know the content of that message. Every possible piece of evidence must be thoroughly examined. Very well then. Governor Kaden. You will read the third page of the document for all present to hear. Yes, sir! Only I should point out, my lord, I can't read Japanese. yeah, okay. That makes sense. This beautiful handwriting, shame on you, Barry. If I could be of assistance here, I would be happy to translate the words into English for the court. Yeah, they wouldn't know what it says if they can't read Japanese, right? You're still here, are you, Dr. Mikotoba? Yes. Naturally, I consider myself a member of the judiciary, albeit a lowly one. But perhaps I should quietly withdraw after I've translated Genshin's message. Your cooperation is much appreciated. Kazuma. The truth is shrouded in darkness, a darkness only our clan's great sword can pierce. Mighty Karuma, twist thy head and watch them fall. I knew it! All thy mortal foes, twist the head of the sword! Uncork it or something, unscrew it, it's inside. That's the end of the message, it would seem. A haiku poem, twist thy head. Father, what is Karuma? The name of the Asogi clan's famous sword, a razor-sharp blade known to all, passed down for generations. It embodies the Japanese spirit. It's not known to me. It's the katana sword that was submitted as evidence earlier in these proceedings. The one worn by the prosecution counsel when he confronted Inspector Gregson. The details of the Asogi papers have been updated in the court record. All these procrastinations are beginning to try my patience. Adjournment of this court is long overdue. As the presiding judge, I have been as accommodating as possible of the will of the courtroom. However, despite all that, no new information has come to light. No! Can I have a look at the sword now? Come on! Mighty Karuma, twist thy head and watch them fall. All thy mortal foes. That's the proper way to use the sword, is it? Maybe I should try it. It hurts my neck, that's the trouble. Mr. Naruhodo, if I might make a suggestion, I think perhaps it doesn't mean your head. I once studied the history and development of the katana some time ago, and as I'm sure you're probably aware, the sword's head is the part at the very end of the hilt. It's written as head in Japanese, but it's pronounced as kashira, I believe. Kashira? So Mr. Asogi's words really meant twist the butt of the hilt? You don't think... That's what I've been saying all along. Look what's inside it. Is that a tightly wound sheet of parchment? In red ink, I bet. Yeah, there we go. A scarlet ink. It's written in scarlet ink. I penned this, my last will and testament, in the final moments before my inevitable and willing death. This is it, isn't it? Mr. Naruhodo, look at the signature at the end. Clint Van Zieks. And the date, 10 years ago, on that fateful night. So for 10 years it's been silently concealed inside Karuma and nobody knew? The last will and testament of Lord Clint Van Zieks. Wait. Oh my goodness. Look at this. This is unbelievable. What, can I read it, please? It's not letting me read it. It's not letting me read it. Yeah, in pursuit of justice, Lord Clint Van Zieks tragically lost all sense of morality. When he murdered his former mentor, clearly he was already devoid of his normal faculties. How dare you! I refuse to believe that of my brother. Too much time has passed. We cannot ever hope to know more than we do now. Especially since the alleged will that he penned in his final moments appears to have been lost forever. Arr! Lord Strongheart. You appear to be in something of a hurry to wrap things up. I wonder why. We've heard you state time and time again during these proceedings that everything you did was in the interests of protecting British law and order. Or is it to protect yourself? And I stand by that. Without the Reaper, we could never have achieved the reduction in crime the capital has seen. What about Inspector Gregson then? And Dr. Wilson? They were no criminals. You used them to achieve your ends, and then you had them killed. However you dress it up, there was nothing fair or just about that. Lord Strongheart, what exactly is it that you're hiding? He's the professor. Dr. Mikotoba, were you not to quietly withdraw after the translation of your former associate's will? In this courtroom, no argument carries weight unless it is supported by evidence. And it would seem that the defense has no more evidence to present. In which case, I hereby order all discourse from these proceedings to be struck from the record. This is my last chance. Mr. Naruhodo, I have to present some decisive evidence now, or it's all over. But can I? Wait, my lord. As it happens, the defense does have evidence to present. What? Don't be absurd. There is nothing of relevance remaining from the time. It's high time that you realized something, my lord. This gentleman has an uncanny habit of producing evidence at the final hour that had escaped everyone else's attention. Nonsense. What is it, Yunosuke? What do you have? I dare say, the final, decisive piece of evidence that will reveal the whole truth about this rotten tale. How can you? Decisive? Well, it would appear there is no escaping it now, my lord. Let it be so, then. Present whatever you think you have that can settle this decade-old enigma, if you're capable. What exactly is this evidence that the defense claims to be so decisive? Okay. There is a single piece of evidence that can clarify what really happened 10 years ago. The last will and testament of Lord Clint Van Zieks. Ha! A wonderfully astute observation, I'm sure. But in case it had escaped your notice, that document was lost long ago. That's right, it was. Only... I have it right here. Discovered just moments ago. Impossible! That can't be! Everything that's happened comes back to this will. This document is the key that will unlock the entire mystery. Grrr! My brother's last will and testament. Where did you find that? It was rolled up inside this. Inside Karuma? That ultimate weapon Genshin Asogi obtained has lain undisturbed in the hilt of the sword all these years, just waiting for the right time to emerge and reveal the truth. The signature and seal certainly look official. My god, it's true. It's my brother's handwriting, there can be no mistake. I forbid the contents of that document from being read out. Do you hear me? I strictly forbid it. You can't do that, my lord. This document could explain everything. That document could literally destroy the meaning of justice in this country. I demand that you hand it to me at once. Why? What are you trying to hide? Could it be that you already know what's written on this page? What are you implying? Court is adjourned with immediate effect. Clear the courtroom. Do that, my lord, and you'll suffer a fatal blow as Lord Chief Justice. I beg your pardon? Forcibly ending a trial without good reason? And not any trial, a closed trial by order of Her Majesty the Queen. To defy the monarch's will is treason. Lord Clint Van Zieks really did pen this. It's exactly as the young Japanese man said. Read it out, now! We have a right to hear what's in that will. A right and a duty. Well, well, my lord. It would rather appear as though proceedings aren't going to go quite as you'd hoped. You fools. Go ahead, Yunosuke. Read it. The prosecution gives its full support. Very well, then. No! For God's sake! No! Read it! Read it! I penned this, my last will and testament, in the final moments before my inevitable and willing death. The hour is 11 p.m. and I sit at my writing desk in my office. My good friend Asogi stands at my shoulder. He has expressed his intent to invoke the dying ritual of the jewel, that I may depart this world with honor. An honor of which I am utterly undeserving. The Japanese are a truly merciful people. I, Clint Van Zieks, Lord of the Manor of the Van Zieks estate, hereby confess to the following. I am the killer who has come to be known in society as the Professor, guilty of 4 counts of murder. I will not here discourse the corruption rife among the aristocracy, which is to me, as one of them, so apparent. However, 6 months ago, I took the life of a member of the House of Lords at the heart of the depravity. A demon who habitually sacrificed the common man to further his own interests, abusing his position of power. The law is impotent against such vile avarice. Only a fellow demon can rid society of this menace. That demon was my quarry, upon whom I willingly set my great hound. But though I am a hunter of some experience, I am a poor felon, it seems. My guilt was at once recognized by another, and I became subject to his extortion. He held over me the threat of exposing my wicked crime to my beloved wife and brother. Under that threat, I have done this man's bidding for months now, killing those he demanded I kill, as I watched my former mentor perish before my eyes at the jaws of the hound I commanded. I realized that I had lost the last shred of decency within me, and sunk to the level of a wild beast. There is no path back to the light. Be it I or my dear friend Asogi who dies this night, I am eternally damned. To my extortioner, Male Strongheart, may you feel the jaws of the beast at your throat every time you swallow. So now we know, yes, Clint Van Zieks was a murderer, but somebody was directing him and naming him as his victims. His extortioner, Lord Male Strongheart. It was you! Lord Strongheart, a moment ago, you claimed that what the court has just heard could destroy justice in this country, but you weren't trying to protect justice at all. All you were trying to do was to protect yourself. Was conceal the secret of your true nature and the countless lives you've sacrificed up until now. It just didn't make sense to me that the third victim, the former Lord Chief Justice, was my brother's benefactor and a man of lofty principles. He ordered him to be killed so that he could take his place, maybe. As I said, Clint had no possible reason to kill the man. But you did, didn't you, Lord Strongheart? To eliminate the man who stood between you and the office you'd set your sights on. So you used your own hunting dog, Lord Clint Van Zieks, to take him down. It had to be done. London's unsavory shadows are deep and the arm of the law fails to reach their depth. Crime must be cut off at the roots, but the Lord Chief Justice at the time couldn't see that. He was weak. Lofty principles, you say. Tantamount to cowardice, if you ask me. Which is why I took his place, in order to fight the crime he was allowing to spread like wildfire. By murdering the man, the Reaper, the Professor, the name makes no difference. As I've explained countless times already, it was all done for the furtherance of law and order in London. Are you going to legitimize the murder of my father now too? Ah, Genshin Asogi. Well, that was unfortunate. I had fully intended to send him back to Japan as we'd agreed. I don't believe you, it was you, wasn't it? You killed him! No, it wasn't me who took your father's life. Then who? On the night following his mock execution, I went to Logate Cemetery at 3 in the morning with Jigoku. Judge Jigoku? There had to be a collaborator on the Japanese side to manage Asogi's treatment after his repatriation. Jigoku had fierce ambition. It made him easy to manipulate. 10 years ago, after it stood trial for the destruction of the witness stand, I had words with him. When I told him the position of Minister of Foreign Affairs could be his, he couldn't agree fast enough. Seiichiro, you fool. As you know, Asogi escaped the prison in a closed casket and was subsequently interred. We intended to dig him out of his grave before he ran out of air. But sadly, all did not go to plan. Arr! There was an unexpected visitor to the cemetery with his own ideas about digging up graves. A man who witnessed what nobody was supposed to see. Enoch Drebber. Of course, I knew grave robbers frequented London cemeteries. But that grave on that particular night... Blast! If people find out the convict wasn't really executed, the scandal will rock the very foundations of the Empire. Then what do we do? Shoot him, Mr. Jigoku! Shoot Asogi at once! He can't live now this has happened. He has to go! What are you talking about? You had an agreement! You promised him he could return to Japan! Everything has changed now. If the truth got out because of this, both of us would be finished forever. Come on, Jigoku, do it! Pull the trigger! Shoot! Jigoku shot Asogi from the shadows, the grave robber who was so close, the blood sprayed over his coat. He fled as fast as his legs would carry him. Then Jigoku and I put Asogi's body back in the grave from which he'd just emerged. When I later learned of the waxwork modeler's presence at the scene as well, I made her swear to two things. Never to remove the professor's mask, and never to speak of the events of that night. And with that, the secret was buried along with Asogi's corpse. So, now you know what really happened in Logate Cemetery that night. It was Jigoku, your Japanese acquaintance, who killed Asogi in the end, you see. He claimed to be the man's friend, but when push came to shove, he pulled the trigger. Just before Mr. Jigoku left the courtroom earlier, he said that the assassin exchange proposal was a demand from his British counterpart, not a request. So you coerced him too, using what happened in the graveyard. By that time, Jigoku was the Minister of Foreign Affairs negotiating international treaties with Britain. You can imagine what would have happened if it came to light he'd murdered a compatriot 10 years earlier. He would have lost everything. I merely reminded him of that. How do you sleep at night? These past 10 years, I've fought tirelessly with the darker recesses of London's criminal underworld, and I've used whatever means necessary to ensure that justice prevails and law and order reign supreme. That couldn't be further from the truth. The fact is, you haven't fought crime at all. How dare you? I saved Clint Van Zieks from dishonor in his death. Whilst behind the scenes you systematically buried anyone who stood in your way, and then you made my father take the blame. It was unavoidable. It was the only way to protect our justice system and public order. Let's not forget the others you had killed as well. Setting the defendant up as the Reaper to cover up the truth behind the murders of countless more. That's enough! Do you have any idea of the conniving that led to the acquittals of those wretched criminals? We have to fight fire with fire. Our courts can't function without a Reaper. Can't you see all I've done for this country? This has been my struggle. You've done nothing. It's Lord Van Zieks here who worked tirelessly and justly in court, whilst enduring the disgrace of the Reaper name. And Inspector Gregson, fraught with anguish for having sullied his hands through a desire to do the right thing. Not to mention Genshin Asogi, who risked his life going in pursuit of the truth you tried to hide. No, the darker recesses of London's underworld were largely filled by you. You little... When will you get it through your thick skulls? That it was all for Queen and country? I'm tiring of that excuse. You've consistently twisted the truth for bargaining power to make others do your bidding, nothing more. People who willingly twist the truth and coerce others have no right to call themselves part of the judiciary. I strongly suggest you don't ever talk of justice again. Grrr! 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 What's happening? What's happening? Well, 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 dear me, my good fellows, dear me! A well-deserved round of applause, I think, for a quite marvelous performance. What are you talking about? Those delightfully grave expressions, that beautifully pronounced Queen's English. Really, our friends from the Far East are quite the picture of industriousness. You fraud, keep your mockery. Please, don't misunderstand. It really is exactly as you've both said. What are you trying to say? I have occupied the darker recesses of London's underworld, and how did you put it? Done nothing? I confess it's a little embarrassing to have it pointed out quite so starkly, but yes, I really have done nothing, which means I can be indicted for nothing, no? It's true. Personally, I have committed no crime. I've merely been surrounded by fools who've acted very rashly indeed. You can't get away with that. You've consistently preyed on people's weaknesses. Preyed? Yeah. No, never mind. Yeah, this is how it's spelled. And what? Threatened them? Are you sure it wasn't just bargaining? I would like to address all the good lords, ladies and gentlemen of the judiciary here present. You all know of these darker recesses in our great capital, and deep down, I believe you also know that to fight those who dwell there requires at least some of us to occupy the darkness ourselves. So let me appeal to your good sense now. Consider the situation with me. If this catalogue of horrifying revelations were to become common knowledge among the 6 million inhabitants of London, what might happen? To learn that the infamous murderer of royals and nobles was a respected member of the aristocracy himself, that evidence was fabricated in the scapegoat's trial amid secret negotiations with prosecutors to effect a jailbreak, that the Reaper of the Bailey was an organized group of assassins managed by a Scotland Yard inspector, and finally, that it was all masterminded by the Lord Chief Justice himself. If the general public of Britain knew the truth, all faith in the police and the prosecutor's office would be completely lost, without doubt. Public order in the capital would completely break down, would be cast back to the lawless days of the last century, precisely as it was 100 years ago when 1 in 10 of the population were criminals. Think what we've accomplished since then, a public policing force, a comprehensive set of laws. And if we want to continue to protect this new era of law and order, I say again, we must at times occupy the darkness ourselves. I think it's time to pull the head of that little rabbit doll. We have successfully identified and apprehended the man responsible for taking Inspector Gregson's life. That is all that was expected of this trial, and all of these other matters that have been discussed will be eliminated from the minutes of these proceedings in the interests of preserving law and order, and to protect Her Majesty the Queen, of course. Well, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, what say you? He has a point. The things Lord Strongheart has done are quite unforgivable. But on the other hand, isn't it our duty to maintain law and order in the capital? You can't deny that the threat of the Reaper over the years has done wonders for the crime rate. And by fair means or foul, that's all thanks to Lord Strongheart. Difficult situation, huh? Sorry, what was that? Are you hearing this? This is the will of the British judiciary. For your rousing response, friends, I express my heartfelt gratitude. Therefore, in accordance with the overwhelming wishes of the courts, the records shall be erased. You have to respect the man's ability to turn a situation to his favor. Lord Strongheart really is a master of manipulation. You've conclusively proven his guilt, yet still he manages to evade justice. I just don't know what we can do. Ryunosuke, it looks like the trial really is going to come to an end now. I'm almost out of options, I think. There's really only one path left open to me. Yes, as I know only too well, the only thing that carries any weight in court is hard evidence. But, naruhodo. Yeah. I have an idea. I don't know whether anything will come of it, but if there was ever a time for using this particular item we have among the evidence, it's now. Oh my, yes. Mr. Sholmes asked if you had that with you earlier. We've exposed all of Lord Strongheart's wrongdoing now. I have no doubt that Mr. Sholmes has already deduced exactly how the truth would unfurl. So I think it must be time for the great detective to take center stage, don't you? Yes, absolutely. Let's take the hair by the ears then, and heave. Alright, here goes. Heave. Ow, 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 ow. My dear fellows, must I remind you every time, a gentle tug will suffice. Mr. Sholmes, you're looking in quite the wrong direction, Mr. Naruhodo, because I'm over here. Mr. Naruhodo, he's... It's Mr. Sholmes. I wasn't expecting you back, Sholmes. How is he projecting himself? Delighted to be here again, Lord Strongheart. What? What is the meaning of this? Bailiff, seize him! Put that man in irons! This is the closed court. You've been warned once already, man. What the? We can't get an hold of him, my lord. We just go right through him. I'm afraid your efforts are wasted, you see. The great detective you see before you is composed entirely of light and shadow, an image, if you will. Mr. Naruhodo, I must congratulate you on your fine deductions. Mr. Sholmes, what on earth is... Are you familiar, I wonder, with the invention known as the telephone? Well, yes, I hear that some public telephones have been installed recently in Tokyo. The sound of the speaker's voice is converted to an electrical signal and transmitted instantly to another place. Quite, sounds are transmitted, so could not images keep them company, I mused. Iris and I did some modest experimentation to develop such a device specifically for this very day. Modest experimentation, Mr. Sholmes? What a modest description. And somewhat incidentally, I thought we might just as well transmit an entire scene. Somewhat incidentally, Mr. Sholmes? Now you're just being immodest. Do you mean to say you're not actually here, Miss Sholmes? I knew my trusty partner would have no trouble grasping the concept. Except he's grasping the stand to steady himself after your shock arrival. Poor father. I would have hoped he might have been forewarned, being the great detective's great partner. Leave my courtroom at once. Get out, or I swear to you. Dear me, you on the other hand, Lord Strongheart, appear to have a very poor grasp of the situation. Allow me to reiterate, I am not here, which would, I hope, lead naturally to one asking, where exactly are you? The very question I was awaiting. I am at present enjoying the air in a rather splendid garden. A garden? Not just any garden, you understand. A garden at Buckingham Palace. What? You can't be. Buckingham Palace? What's Buckingham Palace, Mr. Sato? I've never heard of it. Do you ever read the news, Mr. Naruhodo? Mr. Sholmes, is Iris with you there? Well now, Iris is currently enjoying some tea with the Queen. With Her Majesty. Her Majesty? Not just any Her Majesty, you understand. Her Majesty the Queen of the British Empire. What? What on earth is this all about? Buckingham Palace is Her Majesty the Queen's residence in London, Mr. Naruhodo. Order in court! I demand immediate silence. Her Majesty the Queen? You can't be... I mean, no. This is some sort of unforgivably distasteful trickery by a third-rate detective, that's all. Unforgivably distasteful trickery? What an apt description. A closed court session attended by elite members of the judiciary is a rare event. I presumed that Her Majesty would be more than a little curious about the proceedings, so I decided to show her. Everything. From start to finish. Huh? You showed her? Indeed. By dint of the Herlock Sholmes remote cinematograph. You meddling... This is some kind of nightmare. Just as I appear to be standing before you, regaling you with talk of my latest invention. No doubt you've inferred that the reverse is also true. You don't mean... Her Majesty has seen and heard every moment of the proceedings. I assumed there would be no objection after all. Every trial in this country is conducted under the auspices of Her Majesty, as you know. You... I confess I am quite impatient to hear Her Majesty's opinion about the unforgivably distasteful trickery in which you've engaged over the past 10 years. No, I was merely... Oh, so sorry to keep you all waiting. Victoria, Vicky, and I had so much to talk about. Iris, there you are. In fact, I have a little message here from Her Majesty. A message? Well then, if everyone is sitting comfortably, Forthwith, and with immediate effect, all authority previously afforded to male Strongheart is hereby revoked forevermore. Furthermore, he will be prosecuted for crimes against his country in a public trial by jury in the coming days. So, it seems that Her Majesty doesn't believe we need to fight fire with fire. Justice in this country needn't be administered from the shadows at all. Male Strongheart, the darkness you fostered to conceal your despicable actions these last 10 years is a thing of the past now. After today, your brand of law and order has no future, because no longer are you the Lord Chief Justice. In the eyes of the law and of Her Majesty the Queen, you are nothing but a criminal. Adjourned! 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 Court is adjourned! He broke his stick. This is more than guilty. Uh-oh. 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 Ah! This is so over the top. Lord Clint Van Zieks left a will in which he confessed everything. When those words came out of Asogi's mouth, it deranged me completely. I knew I must do anything and everything in my power to contain the situation. But I couldn't find the damn document. I searched the cell, but it wasn't there. Which precipitated the jailbreak plot, I presume. What do you mean? The need to obtain that will was all-consuming. I was sure that if I facilitated Asogi's escape, he would emerge with the will somewhere on his person. But despite searching his limp body in the cemetery that night, it still eluded me. It never even crossed my mind that it was concealed in the sword's hilt. What pains me now is that my brother left this world without a word to me. I'm sorry, Lord Van Zieks. In point of fact, I think perhaps that isn't the case. Sorry? How can that be? There is more to his last will and testament. What, that we have not read yet? What? As I confront the prospect of my demise, I feel bitter regret for my younger brother. Barak, you have always looked up to me, and now you follow in my footsteps to become a prosecutor. It is my fervent wish that my unspeakable deeds should not hinder your advancement. I ask not for understanding, for none can understand my depravity. I ask only for forgiveness. Asogi is a fine detective, and a hunter worthy of respect. He has agreed to honor my final two wishes. The first is that this document survives. The second, I cannot commit to paper. I have confessed my sins to my wife. May she find resolution in my death. With my eternal gratitude to my Japanese friend, I rest my quill. Clint Van Zieks. Clint. Okay, so, what now? Male Strongheart, you colluded with Seiichiro Jigoku in a criminal plot so immense it spanned the oceans, and you cold-heartedly murdered all those who knew the truth about what happened 10 years ago. But why did you set about that now, a whole decade later? To ascend to the very peak. These last 10 years made me realize being the Lord Chief Justice wasn't enough. Short of becoming Her Majesty's Attorney General, I could have no real power to effect the changes needed in this country. And for that promotion, I needed to ensure no remnants of the past remained. How could you? I like everything to run smoothly in the exact manner that I prescribed, like a well-oiled machine. And I was just a step away. And for your ambition to succeed, did you even bother to count the number of brilliant people you had killed? Ah, Mr. Reaper, are you not forgetting something, such as... You've very much adopted your usual prosecutor-like demeanor in the proceedings now. But the reality of the situation is that you are the defendant in this trial. However, the presiding judge would appear to have fallen from the bench, as it were. May I suggest, therefore, that we entrust the final adjudication to an old friend? My lord. As a member of the judiciary, I have been following the proceedings from the gallery, and I must say, I shan't ever forget the extraordinary battle between good and evil that I witnessed here today. The darkness that has blighted justice in our land these past 10 years has at last been dispelled, thanks in no small part to the efforts of a bright young star from the east. Defense Counsel Naruhodo. Yes, my lord. On behalf of everyone here present in the Old Bailey, I give you my heartfelt thanks. You're too kind, my lord. The first time I faced you in court, just under a year ago now, I had the faintest of intimations that if British justice so warped and twisted over its long history was finally to know change, this might just be the man to do it. What? But at the time, I wouldn't allow myself to acknowledge the possibility. I couldn't overcome my hatred of the Japanese after the circumstances of my brother's death. Mr. Naruhodo, allow me to apologize for countless discourtesies on my part. You are a lawyer of boundless talent. Oh, Lord Van Zieks. When I first arrived in Great Britain, I was literally a nobody, certainly not a lawyer. The truth is, my fortunes have entirely been made by the miraculous people I've met. My best friend Kazuma Asogi, who led me here to Britain in the first place. My loyal and ever-patient judicial assistant, Mr. Sato, who helped me study to become a lawyer. The brilliant Lord Van Zieks, who never failed to challenge his Nipponese rival. And not to mention, the exceptional master of logic and reasoning who showed me the true art of deduction, Mr. Sholmes. Saving the best for last, Mr. Naruhodo. What a relief. I'm well aware that without all these people's help and support, I wouldn't be where I am today. The truth is a guiding light that always leads to happiness. I've lived by that principle for a long time now, but actually, it's not true. The truth can also cause great pain, sometimes even leave people on the brink of despair. And for that reason, there are those who feel the need to hide the truth, who do it instinctively even. But as soon as we allow our eyes to settle on something other than the truth, the darkness takes hold. And from there it grows until eventually it makes us blind to the guiding light of the truth altogether. So that's why it's my belief that we must all resolve never to avert our eyes from what is just and true. So that we can continue to walk the straight and narrow path ahead. Well, I must excuse myself now. But before I go, Mr. Naruhodo, let me compliment you on your grand opus. What? Without your beautifully composed case against Lord Strongheart, Your Majesty would have been unable to act. Thanks to you and your fellows, the haunting undertones of corrupting Britain's justice system have been silenced. Thank you very much. So, until our paths cross again, everyone. Well then, it would appear that this long trial has finally come to an end. My apologies for any anxiety caused, my lord. I'm quite sure we shall meet again here in the courtroom before long, Prosecutor Baruch Van Zieks. In conclusion of these proceedings, I hereby declare the defendant, Baruch Van Zieks. Finally. That took a long time. That is all. Court is adjourned. It really is all over, but did I sacrifice too much? Mr. Naruhodo, I really must congratulate you. It was a truly splendid performance. Honestly, I couldn't be happier for you. Oh, thank you very much, but I really couldn't have done it without you at my side through it all, Mrs. Sato. Your kind words mean so much to me. It really was a very splendid show, that, Naruhodo. I'd have thought you'd be smiling from ear to ear, but you look rather glum. Well, of course I'm delighted about the verdict, but in exposing the truth, I'm afraid I've caused my client a great deal of pain. I'm really not sure that's what a lawyer ought to be doing. Oh, well, in that case, I'm quite sure that when you see Lord Van Ziek's smiling face, everything will seem much better. Is he capable of smiling? Mrs. Sato, everything seems worse. He has a face like thunder. Oh dear, I really shouldn't have presumed. Mr. Naruhodo, yes? Almost a year it's been now since I first encountered you here in this very courthouse. For you to have risen to the level of excellence you demonstrated today, well, it's quite remarkable. But I exposed the most unpalatable truth you could ever have imagined in court today. I feel as though I've robbed you of something you held so dear. What was it he said? To fight those who dwell in the darkness requires at least some of us to occupy the darkness ourselves. But that was just a feeble excuse of a coward. Only those with a steadfast eye for the truth have what it takes to fight the dark forces of crime. You made fine work of establishing that fact in court today. Oh, well, thank you. What magnanimous words! I'm quite sure that Kazuma-sama would have a smile on his face at this very moment if he were here. Kazuma. He is here. Mrs. Sato, there was another face like thunder here. Oh my, and he really was here. Lord Van Zieks, allow me to congratulate you on your acquittal. Congratulate me or curse me. You failed to bring down the Reaper. I owe you an apology. No, it is I who should apologize. Your father, Genshin. If I had been stronger, then perhaps I made an unforgivable error of judgment. I can offer no excuse. And I can offer no forgiveness. That said, I suppose you fought for justice and the truth. For that, at least, I can't withhold respect. What? Ah, yeah, I can't withhold respect, yeah. Okay. Your words mean more to me than you could know. I will hold them dear. Kazuma-sama! I must say, there's one thing that's still bothering me. What's that? The will that Lord Clint Van Zieks wrote before his duel with my father. Sogi is a fine detective and a hunter worthy of respect. He has agreed to honor my final two wishes. The first is that this document survives. The second, I cannot commit to paper. I have confessed my sins to my wife. May she find resolution in my death. With my eternal gratitude to my Japanese friend, I rest my quill. What was the second thing, yeah? What can the second of his final wishes have been? That your father agreed to honor, you mean? I think perhaps I might be able to shed some light on that. What? Father? It was 10 years ago, as you know. The day before the execution was scheduled. I went to the prison to say my farewells to Genshin. Why aren't you putting up more of a fight, Genshin? If you'd only agree to it, Seiichiro and I would gladly petition the government. We've been through this already. You don't need to worry about me. Anyway, Yujin, I have a favor to ask of you. Something of great importance. You're one of my greatest friends, Genshin. Whatever it is, consider it done. I'm going to tell you an address. I need you to go there at once, in secret and telling no one. You should find the Lady of the Gentry in hiding there. A Lady of the Gentry? She's not in a good way, and she's with child. The birth is imminent. Could Clint Van Zieks be the real father of Iris? As a medical man, I'd like you to attend to her. Please, you're our only hope. By any chance, is the child yours, Genshin? Don't be daft. It's a favor that was asked of me by a man I knew, as his dying wish. My goodness, I swore to the man that I would help, that I would do whatever I could for his wife and his unborn child. But if something should happen to me, I need to ask you that same favor. You're the only person I know that I can truly rely on. What did you say? If something should happen to you. Tomorrow night, you're going to be... You never know, though, do you? What life will bring. Alright then, tell me the address. I'll head there at once, with Seiichiro and... No, not with him. Pardon? This is a favor I'm asking of you, and only you, Yujin. Right, I see. Very well then. That very night I caught a train from Paddington to Dartmoor in Devon. I found the old house, in the middle of nowhere it was. A old hunting hound lay asleep in the grounds. The poor woman was on the floor at the back of a darkened room. She was in mortal danger. I broke her waters to precipitate the labor before she weakened further, but it was a torturous birth. I did everything humanly possible for her and her child. And in the end, I was lucky enough to welcome a new life into the world. But tragically, the mother did not survive. My efforts to save the mother's life were in vain. I held the healthy newborn girl in my arms and wept for longer than I cared to remember. Eventually, in something of a daze, I looked around the room. There was precious little in it, but an old travel trunk caught my eye. It had clearly been well looked after over the years, made of top quality leather with fine stitching. But it was when I saw the emblem on the side of it that everything dropped into place. B for Baskerville. But Baskerville? You mean the woman was the wife of Lord Clint Van Zieks? That's right. The newborn was his daughter. But that makes no sense. Why on earth wouldn't Clint have entrusted the child to my care in that case? I was completely unaware that he even had a daughter. I suppose he didn't really have any choice. What? Well, your brother said that he'd confessed everything to his wife, so she must have been beside herself with worry for a child. If the true identity of the professor were ever to be made public, the girl would be forever branded as the daughter of the infamous mass murderer. So the only solution was to distance the young girl from the Van Zieks family as much as possible. I don't believe it. I imagine that in his final hour, Lord Clint Van Zieks made the obvious choice. He would have thought to himself, this Japanese man here is someone I can trust. I honored my promise to Genshin, of course. However, only a month later, I was summoned back to Japan, and without disclosing the parentage of the child, I couldn't obtain permission to take her with me. Oh, how awful. I was completely at a loss. In the end, I had to ask my great friend. I asked him if he would be a father to her. That being Mr. Sholmes, I presume. Yes, he took one look into my eyes and agreed to it on the spot. Mr. Sholmes, he has a heart of gold. Really, all it can be said that I did for the child was to give her a name. Oh? When I'd come to Britain, I was trying to escape from the grief of losing my darling wife, so it was her name that I gave to the little girl. Your wife's name, Professor Mikotoba? In other words, the name of my mother. Ayame Mikotoba. Ayame means Iris. Oh! That's right, Ayame. Or in English, Iris. Iris. I had no idea. Ouch! Mr. Naruhodo, what's wrong? This little thing just pinched me on the behind through my trouser pockets hard. Ah, my dear fellows, can you hear me? Mr. Sholmes, is that you? Ouch! Yes, we can hear you. You see what excessive tugging can do? Let that be a lesson to you. Thank you for the follow, Kita. Mr. Sholmes, we weren't able to thank you properly before, but you were simply marvelous. Your checkmate move was a stroke of genius. Indeed it was, wasn't it? I surpassed myself, I feel. It had become apparent to me that to stop the Lord Chief injustice would require such measures. Bruno, Susie! Oh, Iris. Oh, I'm so pleased. What a wonderful outcome. Her Majesty Queen Vicky said she thought my special blend was delicious. Oh, I'm sure she did. After all, no one brews a more delicious tea than you do, Iris. Let's have a party to celebrate. And Mr. Reaper, you simply must come too. Well, I'm afraid I couldn't. The Reaper of the Bailey, flustered by a 10-year-old girl. Again. No, really? Oh, pooh. But I give you my word that I shall present myself at your residence in the near future to express my gratitude. Oh, how lovely. You've promised now. I won't let you forget. Bye for now, then. Alright, Iris. Thank you for all your help earlier. Oh, that was nothing. Just come back home soon. What's it again? One final pinch goodbye, was it? Okay. God, this is dragging. Well, I think I ought to be leaving. Lord Van Zieks, would you care to accompany me? Certainly. Mr. Naruhodo, allow me once again to express my deep gratitude to you. I believe you saved my life. Not a single smile on the face of this guy. Where's Lord Van Zieks? Yes, what are you intending to do now? Well, clearly I shall have to resign from the prosecutor's office. Oh no! I intend to publicize the full truth about the Professor case. Once that's done, the Van Zieks family will be ostracized completely from London society. Surely not. So as soon as I am free from my employment, I shall leave the capital. Oh, I see. Don't be a fool. Are those the actions of a man once feared as the mighty Reaper of the Bailey? I beg your pardon. For the past 10 years, you've endured that pseudonym and been cast as one of the dark forces yourself. Now that you've finally been freed from that disrepute, your battle is just beginning, surely. Well, I certainly never expected to hear those words from your lips. What's happening to my stream? It's dropping frames. Okay. Okay, anyway. I waited a very long time to come to London. Now I'm properly here. I intend to learn all that I can. Anyway, goodbye for now. Ryunosuke Naruhodo. Kazuma Asogi. It seems as though he's really matured suddenly. He's not the only one who's matured, Mr. Naruhodo. Well, I think we should make our way back to Baker Street. We must help Iris with tonight's dinner. We must. It was then that I came to an important decision about my future. I'm home. Arr! About time you got here. We've been waiting ages, Odo. What are they doing with that colorful piece of history? It's a party, innit? It's gonna go off with a bang. I mean fireworks, ideally. But when you ain't got fire, smoke's the next big thing, isn't it? There's a girl on Fresno Street who could help you with that, I think. Right. I'll remember that. You don't have to reload that thing every time I speak. You really must hear this. It's quite the most extraordinary thing. I assure you it will defy your expectations. Take down every detail now, Mikotoba. Ah, the world-famous great detective regaling his partner with the tale of his adventure. A sight to behold. Would you care to hazard a guess? Where do you suppose the fiendish runaway had concealed himself? Would you believe? Inside the trunk I found abandoned in his cabin. I would believe it, yes. He was there. I say, Mikotoba, I detect not a hint of surprise. I wonder why that is. Maybe because I was there at the scene as well. Sholmes. What? You were? Then why the deuce didn't you say so before? Not quite the sight I was expecting to behold, but still. It's hard not to feel privileged to see it. Hello, Mr. Sholmes, Professor Mikotoba. I'm finally back from the Bailey. And not a moment too soon. A feast prepared by Iris and Mr. Sato awaits. I must say, I haven't seen Susato looking so happy in a very long time. Ah, Runo, there you are. Dinner is on the table, everyone. Please do come and take a seat. Time to feel me... What? Feel me what? To feel me boots? Goodness, is that really true, Gina? Yup, I'm losing me copper's clubber and going back to what I know best. It's diver's life for me. You're really leaving the police force, but why, Jeannie? Well, the boss ain't around no more, so... Oh. And anyway, no matter how hard I try, that Reaper ain't never gonna accept a diver turned dick, is he? Well, people can change, you know. Ah yes, that reminds me. I rather thoughtfully offered to relieve the bailiff of this now defunct piece of evidence. Eh? It's the inspector's pocket watch, and the crown has been reattached. That watch was his pride and joy, a symbol of his great achievements at Scotland Yard. For 10 years without fail, it measured every second of the man's remarkable career. But now, it stopped. Oh, surely you fixed it? Someone needs to keep the memory of Inspector Gregson's career alive, by taking on the great responsibility of winding that watch every single day again. Yes, someone with an equally fierce detective spirit. It's gotta be me. There ain't no one else. Quite right. I mean, after all, the boss was... Well, he was my boss. My boss, yeah. Yes, Jeannie? Oh yeah, and I made you a promise and all, didn't I, Iris? That I'd become a proper detective one day and track down your old man. Alright then, it's decided. I'll do it. And I swear, I'll find your dad and bring him in kicking and screaming. I'm not entirely sure that would be appropriate. Yes, I think, Gina, it might be best to, well... I think I'd like you to forget that promise, Jeannie. Eh? Iris? Well, obviously I've always wondered about who my real daddy is, of course I have. I wanted to know where I've come from. I thought it might tell me something about myself. But I've caused such a lot of trouble trying to find out, for so many people. Hurley, Runo, Professor Mickey. Oh no, not at all, my dear. Really, you owe me no apology to you owe no apology to anyone. But anyway, I've decided to give up on it because I finally realized my daddy is the greatest in the world. I don't think it matters what his name is or where he's from. Don't you agree, Hurley? With every word, Iris. Thank you, Hurley. Thank you, Daddy. I think, Mikotoba. Yes, Sholmes, I think that I ought to express my gratitude to you. For 6 years, you and I solved many a mystery together, and during that time I remember countless expressions of gratitude for our good services. But a moment ago, I heard the most pleasing expression of gratitude of them all, and I should never have experienced it. Were it not for you. You old softy, Sholmes. But I must confess, it's a weight off my mind to hear you say it. Well then, I think this calls for a lengthy violin recital, wouldn't you say? Oh well, the food would go cold, that's the only problem. Maybe next week, early. Are you sure a week is long enough, Iris? Even amidst the most troubling of cases, even reading from the most shocking of revelations, returning in the evening to this suite of rooms, there's always warmth and happiness to be had. The home of the world's greatest detective, and my home too, with my greatest family. This attic room has been my home and office for almost a year now. I've certainly had some unforgettable experiences whilst I have lived here. But I think now the time has come. Time to bid this place farewell. Naruhodo. Oh, Professor! Are you alone? I didn't hear any sound from Susato's room. Yes, Susato-san went out after dinner. She took a carriage. Something about an important matter she needed to take care of. Ah, I see. I wanted to thank you for what you did earlier. Oh, with Iris, I mean. When the subject of her father came up. Lord Clint Van Zieks. I made up my mind many years ago never to tell her who her real father was. It's what was agreed with Genshin after all. Lord Clint Van Zieks' final wishes before he died, you mean? Yes, I've had to take some rather drastic steps at times to protect that secret, you know? Calling Susato back to Japan 6 months ago, for example. That's why. When I read Saseki-san's report about his final days in London, my heart nearly stopped. It stumbled across the crux of that terrible case, the dog's collar. The description of the Baskerville insignia left me in no doubt. Baskerville. If you'd decided to investigate that insignia, sooner or later you'd have made the connection to the Van Zieks. And to make matters worse, Susato knew of the unpublished story as well. The story that Iris had written based on my notes of the time. Ah, yes, the Hound of the Baskervilles. Exactly. It was a work of fiction, but based on the grim reality of a huge beast of a dog being used as a murder weapon. A dog with the Baskerville family emblem around its neck. Armed with those two clues, I feared you and Susato might arrive at the truth. So I invented that story about having collapsed to justify her leaving London and returning to Japan at once. All in aid of halting any investigations you and she might have been contemplating. I see. Something I've never understood is why Susato-san came across that manuscript in Japan, though. You know, Iris is the Hound of the Baskerville story, I mean. Sholmes sent it to me. That was before Susato left Japan. He was very troubled about what should be done about it, you see. I'd read it and carelessly left it on my desk, which is where Susato came across it, of course. It was the one and the same, then. It was the only case Sholmes and I ever pursued that I didn't record in meticulous detail. I was stunned when I discovered that young Iris had pieced together so much of it from my paltry notes. Sholmes and I discussed the matter and decided that we couldn't allow the story's publication. At that point, I returned the manuscript by post to Sholmes for safekeeping. So you did all that to stop Iris from finding out the truth about her father. That's right, because Sholmes had told me how astute she'd become. However, having witnessed events in court today, I say my opinion has somewhat shifted. Oh? I think at some point in the future, the time will come for Iris to know the truth, and when it does, well, I believe it will be for the best. I think so too. Actually, Professor, I wanted to talk to you about something too. Judging from that expression, I'd say you've come to a decision, have you? Yes, I have. I will be returning with you to Japan. Are you quite sure? I'm really only here as a substitute for Kazuma, but he's here in Britain now. as originally intended. Locum student Naruhodo doesn't really have a right to stay, I think. I see. Looking back now, when I first arrived here in February, by becoming a lawyer just seemed to be the way things turned out. With Kazuma, Susato-san, and Mr. Sholmes all gently pushing me in that direction. I spent the best part of a year immersed in this world, but always aware of a seed of doubt inside me. Until today. Standing in that courtroom earlier, all doubts vanished from my mind. I was totally focused, I was sure of my belief in my client, and I was sure I could see the trial through. And at the end of it, I finally realized, no one else chose this path for me. I chose it myself. The path of a defense lawyer, eh? Yes, that's what I am now. That's what I'll be going back. That's what I'll be going back with you to Japan as. And that's the path I'll be following for the rest of my life. Well, it sounds like you've made quite a resolution there. I have. Very well then. I must say, it's extremely welcome news. I shall make arrangements for your return first thing tomorrow, but I don't imagine we'll depart for a few days. Not with the symposium having been cancelled now. Such a shame. Never mind. I'm sure there will be other opportunities in the future. Well then, I'll bid you good night. Susato-san. I just wanted to let you know I'm back. Did you, hear what your father and I were discussing? I'm sorry, I did, yes. I couldn't help, but... Oh, how much did you hear? Well... From the part about Iris's real father, I think. In other words, from the beginning. So you've made up your mind. You'll return to Japan and continue working as a defense lawyer? Yes, I'm sorry. I really should have consulted you about it. I did want to earlier this evening, actually, but you'd already gone out. Oh no, that's quite alright. I already knew that it's what you'd decide, Naruhodo-san. You did? Susato-san? Yes? I suppose this means it has to be farewell soon? I suppose? You'll be a great help to Kazuma going forward. I mean, I know he's a brilliant lawyer, but he's new to the British courtroom. He'll certainly benefit greatly having a brilliant judicial assistant at his side. I'll do my very best. I wish I could say it, but I just can't. I can't ask her to come with me. After all, she was always supposed to be coming to Britain as Kazuma's assistant. It's growing late. We should both try to get some sleep. I'm sure you must be exhausted after today. Oh, yes, you're right. Before I retire, let me just say one more time. You really were quite splendid in court today. So if you ask me, anyone who thinks of you as a substitute or a locum should be ashamed of themselves. Susato-san. Thank you. The 7th of November, 5:42 a.m., Port of Dover, Quayside. I can't believe this day's finally come. You're really leaving then, Luno? I'm afraid so, Iris. Thank you so much for everything. I don't know what I'll do without your wonderful cooking and delicious tea. Oh, I wish you weren't going. but you have to come back and visit. Say you will. Of course. I promise. Well, it was a very brief reunion, but it was a pleasure to pursue a case with you again after so long. For a while, at least, it felt like old times. Yes, I suppose on reflection, there's something to be said for it. Having a little fun once in a while. Okay. Alright, Iris. You do that, yeah. Honk.
佐藤さん。
お荷物はすべて船室に運び込みました。旅立ちにふさわしい素晴らしい朝でございますね。
佐藤さん、今まで本当にお世話になりました。麻生木によろしく伝えてくれますか？
それはご自分の口からお伝えする方が良いかと存じます。
なるほど。
Ah, there he is.
麻生木、どうして？
親友の旅立ちだ。見送らぬわけがないだろう。
ありがとう。女王陛下の国でお前と大暴れするのを楽しみにしていたけど。
うん。どうやらそいつはまたの機会だな。貴様と再び法廷で向き合う日を楽しみにしている。
あ、でも弁護士同士じゃ向き合うのは無理じゃないかな。
俺は検事になる。しばらくはバンジークス教の下で勉強する。そしていずれは死神に被験する検事になってやるさ。
そうか。
なるほど。一つ頼みがあるのだが。
なんだ？
今しばらくこいつを持っていてくれないか？
カルマ、どうして？
俺は見てしまった。あの日俺の中に住む魔物の姿を。あの刑事と対峙した最後の時、瞬きにも満たぬほんの刹那、俺はあの刑事に対して確かに殺意を抱いていた。人の心に救う魔物、そいつは俺の中にもいたのだ。俺はその事実を永遠にこの胸に刻む。そしてその魔物に魅入られた者たちとこれから対峙していくつもりだ。検事として。
Thought someone was calling for me.
それがお前の覚悟ということか。
俺が自らの中に住む魔物を切り伏せるその日まで。これは貴様に託す。受け取ってくれ。
ああ、分かった。確かに預かっておく。それではその日まで僕は僕の道を行くよ。
なるほど様。これからなるほど様が進まれて、私がお供してはお邪魔でございましょうか。
え、それは僕だって一緒に来てほしいです。でも佐藤さんは
思った通りだな。本当に変わらない。お前らしいことだな。
思った通りってまさか知ってたのか？
あの日バンジークス教の裁判が終わった夕刻、彼女は一人で検事局を訪ねて。
御言葉教授と話したあの日。
なるほどとともに日本へ。
はい、勝手なことを言って申し訳ございません。
それを言うためにわざわざ。義理がたいことだな。それであいつはなんと？
あの方は何もおっしゃりません。もしかしたらご迷惑なのかも。
あいつも義理がたい男だ。言えるはずがないだろう。あいつのそばにいてやってほしい。これは俺からの頼みだ。
はい。
佐藤さん、
いかがでしょうか。なるほど様。
佐藤さんが隣にいればどんな法廷でも怖くありません。これからも僕と一緒に戦ってくれますか？
ふつつか者ではございますが、よろしくお願いいたします。
僕の方こそふつつかっぷりでは負けませんよ。
どうかされましたか？
でも佐藤さんの荷物はもう出航の時間です。
あ、それならば心配ございません。スサタの荷物はすでに船に積み込んでございます。
She didn't wait for my answer. Alright.
さすが優秀なホーム女子だな。
な
るほどくん、そろそろ出航の時間なの。
I heard the voice of Iris somewhere before.
達者でな。なるほど。
麻生木、剣を抜け。
What? Oh damn, this ending is really dragging. I'm running out of time. I should go and have dinner.
いつか僕たちの道が再び交差するとき、お前と琴の葉の刃を交わすことになるだろう。その時を待っている弁護士として。
その言葉を聞きたかった。相棒。
それではまた会おう、麻生木。
ああ、必ずな。なるほど。
ホームズさん、本当にお世話になりました。
ああ、本当にね。お世話をしたものだよ、君。
このご恩は一生忘れません。
忘れられてたまるか。ぜひ思い出してほしいものだな。今度僕が君たちの国にお邪魔した時にね。実はこいつは意外に知られていない事実。この地球はね、思ったよりも狭いのだよ。
いつかぜひ日本に来てください。
その時はもう全力で歓迎いたしますとも。それなら私も行くの。
そうと決まったらしばしのお別れだね、諸君。
Okay then.
これで僕の物語はおしまいだ。不思議な運命で地球の裏側まで旅をした僕は、一生をかけて旅を続ける僕だけの道を見つけた。この長い旅のどこかできっとまた彼らに出会う日が来る。その時僕は懐かしい あの声を聞くはずだ。
さあゲームの始まりだ。
東より訪れた友を乗せた船が水平線の向こうへ遠ざかってゆく。だがホームズの顔は明るかった。時代が流れても友情は変わらないよ、ワトソン。
ワトソン。
彼らに会いたくなったらそっと目を閉じればいいのさ。
私はそっと目を閉じる。その時私は懐かしいあの声を聞くはずだ。
異議あり。
異議あり。
I could see it coming. I could see it coming.
なるほどくん。
Well, that's it then. This is the end. Okay, I'll be absent a few minutes because I have a few things to take care of before I have dinner. And I'll come back to stop the stream after all of this has finished rolled out. So if you guys want to watch it, I'll be right back. Right, okay, I have a few more minutes just so that we can go through the credits. Ah, she's going to see her mama. I'm not a corpse yet, am I? No. And I'm glad? Oh, okay. Here I am again in Great Britain on the invitation of my dear old university friend. He sent me a very nice letter saying he'd like to show me around now that... there's... What have I done? I was so excited. I picked a splendid hotel and now I can't afford a bill. Oh, Barrack, come to my rescue again, please. I wish I could just vanish into thin air sometimes. It's a bit too fast for me to read sometimes. Hi, Madame Taspels. When I went to make the waxwork impression of the killer in the cemetery, I realized what had happened. But even in the witness stand of the highest court in the land, I could never speak of it. Aha. The Lord Chief Justice and I had struck a bargain, you see. So she knew all along. For a faithful reproduction of the visage, there is nothing we Taspels would not do. Damn, she knew. Chieko Akizuki. Hey, everyone calls me gossip. I sell jaunty little tidbits to passers-by, you know. Hey, everyone calls me a pepino, and I sell the spaghetti. It's more red than a something. Everyone, they call me... No, I cannot do it. This is ridiculous. Oh, Daily, how charming. You've made lots of new friends here, I see. Yes, and when we're released, we're all going to strike it rich together. When I was accepted on the foreign study tour, ah, crap, this is too fast. However it might have ended, I knew that I wanted you there to see it. If I'd ended up in the dock, there's no one I would have rather had defending me. But now, thanks to you, there's a new path I want to take. I'm sure we'll meet again in the courtroom, my friend. Until then, I leave Karuma in your care. I've made some tea, Naruhodo-san. It's important that you rest whilst you can. Once we arrived in Japan, you shall be busy establishing your new office. I'm so delighted to be accompanying you. After all, your talents have been recognized by a great detective. Because you really are the greatest of lawyers. A great ace attorney, some might say. Okay. There's probably gonna be a bit more of the credits. Yeah, the credits will be very much like those of last time. Okay, I'm gonna export the first part of today's stream already. AA. Yeah, it's gonna be very much like the credits of the previous game, I think. Okay, let me skip perhaps, yeah. Okay, the Risen Resolve awarded. Oh, that's a nice art right there. Okay, I've already got the thing set up for tomorrow. Okay, so we're done with this game. Tomorrow I'll be streaming The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Randomizer for the second time. I felt like replaying a randomizer, and this was one that I liked a lot, so I want to do it again. Take it easy, people. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon, and this will be Zelda then tomorrow. See ya, bye-bye, take care.